Chapter 41, Ghost Cry Wolf Howl Halloween, Green. Ted came back to his dormitory, set down his bag, and carried his guitar to his usual spot. Before he could finish a single song, Helena drifted in as expected. "Did you find anything last night?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper, still otherworldly. Ted hesitated. "I'm not sure. It might be some magic left behind by Ravenclaw." "Mother." Helena's restraint broke. Silver tears, bright as quicksilver, streamed from her eyes, falling to the stone and vanishing. "I miss her so much. I want to tell her I'm sorry. I failed her." Her sorrow poured out, a 1,000-year-old grief made suddenly fresh. How do you comfort a ghost who has carried grief for centuries? With Ted's shallow grasp of mind-related magic and the Muggle world's less than a century of psychology, he had no real answer. All he could do was listen. Helena recounted it all: the jealousy of her mother's reputation, the desperate wish to be smarter and more renowned than Rowena Ravenclaw, the foolish belief that stealing the diadem would grant her wisdom, and her tragic end in Albania before she could even tend to her sick mother. She even told how she'd been tricked by a Slytherin student decades later and led him to the diadem's hiding place. That student was Lord Voldemort. Ted could only hold his guitar and watch her, helpless to offer even a handkerchief. "It feels better to say it," she said finally, composing herself. "Those words have been bottled up for so long." She asked Ted about her mother's statue, how no one had ever discovered it was enchanted. It was, outwardly, a simple bust of Rowena Ravenclaw, hair flowing and the famous diadem absent. It had lasted 1,000 years because of fine materials in the castle's magic. Ted touched his temple. "It might not be ordinary magic," he murmured. "More like a cluster of thoughts." He couldn't exactly name it, but he sensed something there on a deeper level, less like normal magical fluctuations and more like something akin to mind power. If it were ordinary, every Ravenclaw of note would have noticed. This felt like a different field altogether, bordering on thought magic. Helena fell silent for a moment, remembering. In her later years, Mother set aside rune spells and much of the ancient magic, she said. She began researching unusual magic instead. "I think I need time to investigate." "Thank you, Ted," she said, and then passed through the wall. Afternoon classes blurred past. The little wizards barely registered them. After 2 months at school, the first festival and feast had finally arrived. Excitement hummed through the castle. Dinner that night would be later than usual because of the festivities. When Ted and his 5 companions reached the Great Hall, they were stunned. Countless candles and braziers set the room aglow. Conjured bats skimmed the enchanted ceiling and the walls. Now and then, one would strike a wall and vanish. Pumpkins carved into grotesque faces were piled along the walls and on the tables, some jack-o'-lanterns even floating and spinning. Pumpkin pasties steamed, stacked high, and a sweet, irresistible aroma filled the air. Ding! A system notification chimed. Triggered festival quest. Howling Halloween. Is this it? Eat pumpkin pasties, drink pumpkin juice, watch bats, poke jack-o'-lanterns? Halloween isn't supposed to be boring like that. If this were the Muggle world, the school would have been set on fire by now. Let's show them a real Halloween. Objective: scare 10 people before the feast ends. Progress: 0-10. Reward: 200 XP, card ghostly cloak. Card effect: put on a pumpkin hat, good luck encircles your head, don a ghostly robe, good fortune settles on you. Ted read the quest, frowned, and leaned toward his friends. "This is too ordinary." "This is ordinary." Ron's eyes bulged. "Your standards are a little high, aren't they?" "As the new generation of wizards," Ted said, "we have a responsibility to make Halloween interesting. I have a plan." The plan attracted others. The Weasley twins and their roommate Lee Jordan joined in, along with Ted's gang. Most of the students were already sampling pumpkin pasties and waiting for the feast to officially begin when a scream cut through the hall. Everyone froze and turned. At a side entrance, a bloodied face stumbled in. A student, it seemed, clawed at by an iron-blue, bulging, ghostly hand that seized him by the back of the neck. A bloody axe swung and struck his head with a sickening crack. The boy collapsed with the axe lodged in his forehead, blood spread across the floor. A terrifying spectral face, huge as a carriage wheel, peered in through the doorway. An icy wind swept the great hall, and students shivered. Screams built and then exploded into a chorus so high and frantic it seemed to pierce the enchanted ceiling. The hall's light dimmed, candles and braziers flickering. Chaos reigned. Children howled and surged for the exits. Ding. Quest Howling Halloween completed. Reward 200 XP. Card. Ghostly cloak. Item card equip. Disguises the wearer as a ghost, allowing silent movement. Note, appearance only. It does not permit passing through walls. A voice rang out above the screams. Quiet. Everyone knew that voice. It calmed the students instantly. Dumbledore stood at the professor's table with several colleagues. No one had noticed him arrive. Ted signaled his group from the shadows. Hurry. If we wait much longer, we'll get blamed. Snape, predictably, was on the warpath. He glared at the gathered students, venom in his voice. Scaring students, disrupting the school's Halloween feast. Expulsion. Ted rolled his eyes inwardly. Could the man be more dramatic? He'd take the blame if he had to. He'd completed the quest. But the other professors stepped in before Snape could sentence half the school to Azkaban. Dumbledore tapped his wand against his throat, projecting his voice with a sonorous charm. Students, please remain calm. This was a prank our friends staged for Halloween Eve. I find it rather amusing. Slowly, realization spread through the Great Hall. The corpse with the axe was Jerry. The ghost that appeared to split the boy's head was Ron, perched on Neville's shoulders. Their theatrics had been convincing. The massive spectral face was a transfiguration time. Ted had conjured, manipulated by Harry from behind. Ted's marathon of horror movies had not been wasted. The carriage wheel-sized ghost was genuinely terrifying, and the first witnesses had shivered in earnest. The icy wind had been produced by Ted's freezing spell, amplified by Hermione's hurricane charm. The Weasley twins had used a fire-extinguishing charm to dim the candles and braziers. It couldn't fully snuff them out, but it lowered the brightness enough to make the illusion work. Lee Jordan had been the sound design, orchestrating screams and panic to perfection. If the professors hadn't appeared when they did, Ted and his friends might have scared half the hall into wetting themselves. The quest had been overcompleted. Hundreds had been startled, not just 10. Professor McGonagall stepped forward, stern. You lot nearly ruined the Halloween feast. Gryffindor loses 20 points. Professor Flitwick, though he had only a couple of students implicated, pointed a finger too. And Ravenclaw loses 20 points. According to our witness, he was the mastermind. Ted checked his other quest. A student life without losing points is incomplete. Progress, 75-100. Ted wanted to laugh so badly he could have burst. Part triumph, part irritation. If only there were some way to buy a little mercy with a subscription or a monthly pass. Could he get 2? 42. Professor Quirrell, please start your show. Most of the staff and students at Hogwarts were amused by Ted and his group's prank. In their Western sensibilities, there was a generous tolerance for practical jokes, and this one was fairly tame. Gryffindor, Ravenclaw, and Hufflepuff thought it brilliant. Gryffindor loved the idea of a prank that involved the whole school. Ravenclaw admired the planning, discipline, and technical cleverness and wanted to study it. Hufflepuff simply declared it the most exciting thing to happen all year. Only Slytherin was furious. They felt like the joke had been played on them. By the time the hubbub died down, it was almost time for the evening's entertainment. Rumors had flown that Dumbledore had invited a skeleton dance troupe. Most of them were nonsense. What came through the doors were the Weird Sisters, the most famous wizarding band in Britain. Despite their name, all the members were men, with long rock star hair. They opened with Do You Dance Like a Hippogriff and earned thunderous applause. There was singing and acrobatics after, and the great hall buzzed with excitement. After the performance came dinner. With a flick of Dumbledore's wand, plates and cups were piled high with food. Aromas filled the air, and everyone felt a little happier. Hermione was filling her plate while still trying to say something. Ted grabbed a fork and spooned a generous helping onto her plate. Eat, he urged. Quick. Why the rush? Hermione asked. She liked most of what he'd put down, so she didn't refuse. Ted ate a steak, then lowered his voice. They say Halloween at Hogwarts is cursed. Something always happens. Harry, Ron, and the others looked skeptical. Is that true? Ted didn't elaborate. Just eat. If you don't, you might not get another chance. That was all Ron needed. He and the others ate like they'd not seen food in days, a whirlwind of knives and forks. Around them, students assumed they must be famished. House elves in the kitchens felt the rush of orders. Then, with a thud, the doors to the great hall flew open. A figure wrapped in a purple turban stumbled in, shouting, "Monster, monster, it's out! Down in the dungeons! It's—" His voice climbed to a high, theatrical wail. He faltered, fell in the middle of the hall, stretched out his hand, and shut his eyes as if overcome. For a split second, everyone froze. No one expected Professor Quirrell to run in that fast. Nobody expected him to hit such a high note either. Some students laughed. This looked like another piece of the night's entertainment. Quirrell lay there, and the room held its breath. He peeled his eyes open like a dying candle, looked around in mock terror, and gasped, "Quick! Run! Monsters! Dumbledore! Monsters!" Then he fainted again. The second time, his face wore a look of such agonized terror that the laughter died. His acting, suddenly, was terrifyingly good, believable enough to make pupils' stomachs drop. Chaos followed like thunder. "Monsters!" echoed, with those two syllables working their way into screams and shouts. Someone grabbed their fork and shoved it into their mouth. "Let's go!" Ron blurted, panic sharpening his voice. A few tried to flee. One Gryffindor, the self-styled boxing king, slammed his fist on a table. "Run! Run from what? Calm down," he shouted. Harry's presence soothed the nearest tables. His calm, determined stare quieted several students as effectively as a knife and fork would have intimidated an unseen beast. Ted tried to comfort those around him. "Don't worry. Dumbledore is here. This is the safest place." But with over 200 people packed into the hall, one panic-stricken group was enough to set off a stampede. In the confusion, someone stepped on the limp Professor Quirrell. A distinct footprint marred the purple of his turban. Quirrell grimaced in pain, and in even greater fear for Lord Voldemort tucked beneath his turban, but he didn't move. Dumbledore rose and cast a sonorous without wand or words. "Silence! Head boy and head girls, take your houses back to the common rooms." Order slowly returned. Students gathered their things and filed out under the instructions. Hermione hadn't quite finished eating. "You were right," she muttered to Ted. "I'm not done." Ted patted the craft paper bag he carried inside his sleeve. "It's okay. I packed some." They stepped out of the great hall together, and a glowing line of text hammered across Ted's vision like a spell. Ding. Mission triggered. This is your first major event since enrolling. Are you just going to muddle through? What's so scary about that monster? You are safe at Hogwarts. Don't be a coward. Show what you can do. Objective, defeat the monster, Professor Quirrell spoke of. Reward, 500 experience. Card. Note, the Golden 100 Battles invisibility cloak will not return until the monster is defeated. A combat mission, blue tier. Manageable. The reward made the risk worth considering. Ted quickly estimated his odds. There was a chance. He slipped the paper bag into Hermione's hand. "Take the food and go back to your common room," he said. "Now." Hermione's expression sharpened. She sensed something. She tucked the bag into her cloak and followed him anyway. "What are you planning? Don't try to shake me off." Before Ted could protest, Jerry had already noticed them moving strangely and tugged at Ron. Harry caught sight of the attempt to slip away. His eyes narrowed, and he exchanged a look with Ron. The two of them supported Neville and moved with the others. Neville was a bundle of nerves. He didn't know what his friends had in mind. He had a terrible feeling about it, and worst, they were dragging him into breaking rules again. "Please," Neville thought, "don't let my Gran find out. She'd kill me." Ted pulled his small group into a shadowed corridor and frowned. If this were just him, he could take the risk and run. Taking his friends along made it much harder. Still, backing down from an adventure when the others were already game was a poor look. He decided on a compromise. "Look," he said quietly, "don't do anything reckless. We'll just watch. Understand?" "Understood," they chorused, nodding eagerly, relieved at the idea of being spectators. They would only watch. No getting their hands dirty, for now. Chapter 43. 3 monsters wreak havoc at Hogwarts. In the castle's basement, 3 monsters were rampaging through the corridors, tearing through everything in their path. Suits of armor were hurled aside, statues smashed, and paintings ripped from their frames. Even the torches and braziers along the walls were clubbed and sent sputtering. The portraits cried out and fled. Some of the ladies and madams shrieked and bolted, lifting their skirts in frantic flight. So realistic, the painted ladies even revealed their undergarments. The portraits in the magic world were astonishingly detailed. Did they even have layers? They had even painted that. Ansu landed silently on a high relief, concealed in shadow, while Ted watched the chaos through its eyes. The three monsters were all different. The first looked like a modified giant troll, 3.5 meters tall, about a full body larger than a normal troll. Its belly was light yellow, its back a dark blue-black, studded with wart-like bumps like an exaggerated crocodile hide. Its head was surprisingly small compared to its thick neck and massive shoulders, so that head, neck, and shoulders formed a blunt triangle. It moved clumsily. Its head could only turn about 60 degrees left or right, giving it a narrow field of vision. It swung a huge club, smashing whatever stood in its way. A full suit of armor by the wall flew over 3 meters from one blow, completely dented, and the troll even stepped on it. In sheer destructive power, it was as strong as several adult wizards, but its intelligence seemed very low. Through Ansu, Ted used appraisal on it. The result read, Giant Troll, level 6. Troll, level 2, modified magical creature attributes. Strength 17 Constitution, 14 Agility, 4 Intelligence, 3 Perception, 4 Spirit, 4 Charm, 3 Luck. Trait, Troll Blood, green. Skills, Herculean Strength, level 2, Magic Resistance, level 2, Rapid Healing, level 2, Roar, level 2. Evaluation, a giant troll infused with the blood of an otherworldly troll. Its combat power has roughly doubled. Total level 8, comparable to a regular aura. Ordinary adult wizards cannot fight it hand-to-hand. However, Intelligence 3 is a major flaw. It behaves more like a very strong wild beast than a cunning opponent. If there had been only this creature, Ted wouldn't have worried much. The upper limit of brute strength is constrained by intelligence. No matter how strong, a very stupid combatant is still limited. Ansu tucked its long snout under a wing. My goodness, what is that horrible smell? Ted quickly cut the olfactory link to Ansu. In those few seconds, the stench washed over him, and he felt nausea rise, almost retching. Hermione, seeing him clutching his chest, asked, Ted, are you all right? I'm fine. Really, I won't die, he lied, forcing a smile. He didn't know whether trolls normally smelled that foul, or whether Professor Quirrell's modifications had made it worse, but the odor was effectively an area attack. There were 2 more monsters. The second was an insectile hybrid, part spider, part mantis. The rear half and 8 legs were spider-like. The front was a long neck with a triangular head and 2 scythe-like mantis blades. With its neck raised, it stood about 1.7 meters tall and measured roughly 2.5 meters in length. Its coloring was a camouflage mix of yellow, green, and gray, perfect for hiding in the wild, but conspicuous in the castle. Appraisal read, Zhulang Insect, level 4. Giant Insect, level 1 modified magical creature attributes. Strength 9 Constitution, 8 Agility, 7 Intelligence, 3 Perception, 5 Spirit, 4 Charm, 4 Luck. Trait, Camouflage, green. Skills, Blade/Elf 2, Climbing Elf 2, Compound Eyes Elf 2. Evaluation, 2 insects roughly spliced and enlarged by magic. Survival alone is a success. Level 5 overall, on paper equivalent to a freshly graduated ordinary wizard. In practice, however, its hunting machine body and compound eyes make it a cold, efficient killer. A calm, well-trained group could handle it, but panicked students might not. The third was smaller, a 4-legged beast that resembled a dog or wolf, about 80 centimeters tall and 1.5 meters long. Its front legs were longer than its hind legs, so it moved in a semi-ape-like posture on its forelimbs. It had tiger-like stripes, a gray lower body shading to golden yellow on top, and a short pointed horn on its head. Most notable was its huge maw filled with steel-like teeth that glinted coldly. A bite could punch holes through iron armor. Appraisal read, Unnamed Horned Beast, level 3. Magic-bred creature attributes, Strength 6 Constitution, 6 Agility, 6 Intelligence, 3 Perception, 5 Spirit, 4 Charm. Trait, none. Skills, Claw Attack, level 2, Pounce level 2, Bite level 2. Evaluation, no clear lineage. The creator attempted to invent a new magical creature, but it appears of little value. It's weaker than the others and lacks special abilities. Because it has no clear original form, appraisal cannot place a name. This was a manufactured beast. Ted decided to call it the Chi Luo Horned Beast, There was no doubt in his mind it was related to Professor Quirrell. "How is it? Do you see what they are?" Harry asked. Ted held out his hand. "Hold hands. I'll show you what I see." The others hesitated for the odd ritual. Were they missing some secret magic training? 5 hands stacked on Ted's palm. He used his mind power to project the images from Ansu's viewpoint into their heads. This was a new ability he developed through his bond with Ansu. The connection between a wizard and a familiar ran deeper than most imagined. Wizards can act through their familiars, the famous example being Dumbledore and Fawkes. Ted's link with Ansu had been strengthening, letting him share sensory impressions. With meditation, he had built a channel that could carry vision and sound. By holding hands, he could now extend the projection to his friends. It was like a crude legitimacy. The monsters appeared in the group's minds. Jerry swallowed audibly. "Looks dangerous," Ron muttered, his face blanching at the insect's legs. Neville breathed. "Should we just run?" He eyed the giant club. The thing was nearly Ted's own height, and thought of the scoldings from his grandmother he might never endure. Harry shook his head. "We have to try. Not to fight them head-on, but to delay them. Buy the professor's time." "How? With a fire-making charm? Cutting curses? Our spells aren't powerful enough," Hermione said calmly. It was encouraging that no one was being overconfident. This was the age where kids imagined punches could pierce steel and brave stunts could slay beasts. Instead, everyone was level-headed. All eyes turned to Ted. They knew from practice sessions he could sever a training dummy's head with a single cutting curse and then repair and cut it again. If he said it was hopeless, they'd back away. Ted thought for a moment. There's a secret passage nearby. If we can't beat them, we can run and hide. The Weasley twins' several secret ways through the castle. They found one in this part of the basement. We can get inside and be safe. He had already assessed the monster's relative threats. The Chi-Luo horned beast was only a little stronger than a wolf. A calm 5th year could handle it. The Julang insect was dangerous because of speed and lethality, but not magical. Knowledgeable students with many spells could counter it. The real problem was the modified giant troll. Sheer size, magic-resistant skin, and overwhelming strength made it like a rampaging armored vehicle. Ted and his friends were, by comparison, armed with nothing more than sidearms. The one saving grace was the troll's very low intelligence and its potent, unpleasant odor. 44. Fight like a man. Ted reached out and touched Hermione's head, granting her Ravenclaw's wisdom blue. Hermione's fluffy little head twitched, her eyes widened as she stared at Ted. He winked, telling her to be quiet. Hermione's base intelligence had been a solid 7, a true natural scholar. With the 2 extra points to intelligence and 1 to spirit, it was as if her mind had snapped into razor-sharp clarity. Problems that had seemed complicated before now felt trivial. The sensation was exhilarating, almost addictive. With the boost, Hermione would perform far better. The group already had a battle plan and an evacuation route for civilians. In a moment, Hermione's role would be crucial. They also needed to cast bubblehead charms on each companion to prevent non-combatants from inhaling dust or venom. The 3 monsters had already torn up a corridor and were making for the first-floor stairs, still a little disoriented. They'd suddenly escaped their cages, but had no idea how or why. Their low intelligence showed it. They were little more than 5-year-old minds, slightly cleverer than ordinary beasts, but not much. They remembered, vaguely, that they were supposed to cause chaos and wreak havoc, and nothing more. Just as they were about to climb the stairs, a sharp pig-like squeal split the air, and a large, fat black boar charged down the stairs. The lead giant troll grunted and swung its massive club to smash it. Duang! The dull thud of wood on stone. Even the ancient, millennium-old steps cracked. Those stairs were antiques. But the black boar didn't flinch. It passed through the troll's club and rammed the Julang insect, the second in line, head-on from below. The insect didn't understand why the boar hadn't been felled, but it instinctively lashed out with its 2 emerald-green blade arms. The blades moved with such speed they left afterimages. Ted watched, alarmed. Although this creature looked stupid, that one rapid counterattack could be lethal if it hit right. Even the blades slid off the boar. Without looking back, the boar barreled into the Chi-Luo horned beast in 3rd place. The horned beast, confused about why its teammates were attacking from behind, lashed out with long claws and opened its jaws to bite what turned out to be nothing. The boar kept charging into the darkness, slammed into a wall, and vanished. It wasn't a real boar at all. It was Ted's item card, Wild Boar Firecracker. From a third-person perspective, someone might have noticed the boar's oddness, but when a creature larger than you charges at you from a first-person view, who has the luxury of analysis? The three low IQ monsters simply stared, dumbfounded, at the wall where the boar had disappeared. The giant troll looked furious enough to start smashing the wall to find it. A blue ice arrow shot from the shadows in an instant, grazing the giant troll and striking the Zhulang insect. The insect was the least likely to be surprised. Its compound eyes almost covered 360 degrees, but even it couldn't dodge in time. The ice arrow, far stronger than a human bludgeoning blow, punched a fist-sized hole through the insect's chitinous carapace. The shell shattered, and half the insect's body turned a pale bluish color, exhaling cold as its limbs stiffened. Insects are especially vulnerable to cold and fire. The arrow chilled it to the bone. Ted's newly developed ice arrow, thanks to his work on frost armor, had paid off. It still took 4 seconds to prepare, which made it nearly useless in prolonged combat, but it was perfect for a first strike. The giant troll bellowed like thunder, a long roar that shook the corridor and disrupted the companions' timing. They'd been about to cast, most clapped hands to their ears. Jerry's vision even swam. The troll was already hurrying up the stairs. At that moment, Ted had to act. He used mind power to block the ringing and keep calm, repressing everything but the battle plan. Then he cast a spell at the steps ahead, skidding smoothly. The skidding jinx made a stretch of road or stairs slick and flat like a slide, perfect for making someone fall. He'd learned the charm from a library book and practiced it a few times, never thinking he'd need it. Now it was invaluable. The stair treads under the giant troll turned into a steep, greasy slope. The troll slipped, crashed down the steps, and slid into the frozen Zhulang insect, shattering 2 of the insect's slender legs on impact. The Qiluo horned beast managed to dodge, only to be hit by Ron's fang curse. Its fangs grew explosively, filling its mouth. The beast flailed, shaking its head to dislodge the sudden teeth, to no avail. Harry followed with cutting curse. The pale red spell sliced a 20-centimeter gash across the horned beast's back. Blood spurted. Harry hadn't realized the spell would be so devastating. Seeing all that blood shocked her. Jerry cast Leglocker Curse on the still struggling Zhulang insect. Its remaining legs shot together and stuck, sending it rolling, its blade arms slashing wildly and gouging the stone. Even the troll took some damage, its thick skin split, yellow-green ichor seeping out. Enraged at its teammate, the troll kicked the insect 7 or 8 meters away. But then dozens of white paper butterflies swarmed around its head, fluttering so erratically the troll's vision blurred to white. When it lashed out, its hands found only empty air. Frustrated, it began slamming itself with its club, duang, whacking its own skull. The paper butterflies Hermione had transfigured from paper had effectively scrambled its brain. "My head! I'm hitting myself," the troll seemed to say. Its temper and confusion only made it hit harder. Jerry reinforced the effect with more Leglocker curses on the half-crippled insect and added 2 more on the Qiluo horned beast. Apart from the troll's tantrum with the butterflies, the other 2 monsters had been neutralized. But the giant troll remained a problem. "How is it so resistant to being hurt?" Ron snarled. In a short time, the troll had clubbed itself 5 or 6 times with thigh-sized blows and was barely bleeding. The Leglocker, fang, and cutting curses had almost no effect on it. Magic resistance level 2 put it practically immune to the first year's standard attacks. Facing that troll, Harry, Ron, and the others felt as useless as trying to win a duel with a blunt twig, laughably ineffective. Professor Quirrell's modifications had worked. After he infused it with troll's blood, the creature had grown in every metric but intelligence, especially in resilience. A normal troll would be down after a few hits like that. This giant troll simply shrugged it off. "Let's take care of the other 2 first," Ted shouted. "One thing at a time." He launched another ice arrow. He had to grind for 4 seconds to prepare it, and struck the Zhulang insect again. The arrow punched through another fist-sized hole, at least 30 centimeters deep. For a giant insect, that was devastating. 2 ice arrows and a troll's kick had already ended its ability to fight back. Only its blade arms twitched slowly. Death had come sooner than it expected. Neville, who'd done little until now, suddenly cried, "Look out!" Thanks to reader Dajunghua Ludo Liu for the 100 reward. Thank you. 45. Gryffindor Juggernaut. "Look out!" Neville shouted from the side, and Ted's heart leapt into his throat. The Chi Luo horned beast, already struck by 4 or 5 cutting curses, its hind legs locked, was thought to be dead. The injuries had only sharpened its animal fury. In a desperate struggle, it grabbed a dented bit of armor from the floor and flung it up. The Chi Luo horned beast's forelimbs were highly developed, almost like human hands. They could grasp. Ted had missed that. Neville, who wasn't the strongest at spellwork and had barely impressed anyone until now, lunged. He snatched a longsword from a piece of armor behind him and with a vertical chop sent the shoulder plate hurtling away from Jerry's head. If it had struck, Jerry's skull would have been split open. Jerry clutched his round ears and let out a small, terrified, "Neville, thanks!" But the danger wasn't over. The beast drew its hind legs together, used its long forelimbs for balance, and vaulted forward. Its body was built so oddly that those forelimbs weren't counted as legs and hadn't been locked by the leg locker curse. In this unconventional way, it was now scrambling and charging at them. The slick slope of the staircase couldn't stop it. Agile as a gibbon, it grasped the banister and in a blink had hauled itself up more than 2 meters, closing in. "Ah!" Neville suddenly roared and charged with the longsword. Courage surged through him. All he could think was to block the monster and protect his friends. For that instant, he was nothing but a warrior. Ted rose to the occasion too. "Protego, frost armor!" he shouted. He threw up 2 protective spells on Neville, first a Protego barrier, then a thin sheet of ice armor. Crack! Splat! The beast's claws bounced off the frost armor, and the cold began to creep into its arms, slowing its movements. Which didn't matter. Neville's sword was already through its heart. The strike was clean, decisive, fatal. Neville threw his whole weight forward in a selfless lunge that found the heart without a miss. The Chi Luo horned beast gave a single twitch and fell silent. Neville instinctively pulled the sword free and stood there in a daze, posing like the armored knights he'd seen in books. He looked at his companions as if to ask, "What happened? How did it die?" Then he glanced down at the longsword stained with blood in his hand and blinked. Hey, this was easier to use than a wand. Hermione had been working flat out, transfiguring sheets of white paper into paper butterflies to swarm the giant troll's face and keep its walnut-sized brain from thinking about anything else. She had done a great deal, but she was only a first year with level 1 magic. In under 3 minutes, she was exhausted. "No, I can't hold on," Hermione cried, sweat beading on her nose. The butterflies around the troll's head had thinned and were starting to flutter awkwardly. "Everyone, levitate the troll's club," Ted barked. After the Chi Luo horned beast's desperate counterattack, everyone was suddenly much more serious. Battle allowed no carelessness. They had learned that the hard way from Professor Quirrell. They all aimed their levitation charms at the heavy club in the troll's hand. Neville's and Jerry's spells failed, but the rest took hold. Even Ron, who'd never had much luck in class, managed a successful levitation charm, and the corners of his mouth twitched into a proud smile. The troll, its face still swatting at butterflies, suddenly felt its hand empty. The huge club slid from its grip and hung floating in the air. Disoriented, it blinked. What happened? Who am I? Where am I? Ted seized the opening and fired an ice arrow straight at the back of the troll's head. The bolt hit hard. The troll staggered but tried to stay upright. Then the heavy, dead wooden club dropped from the air and smashed the base of its skull. That final blow was the last straw. The troll collapsed with a thunderous crash, like a mountain toppling a column. Ding! Defeated Chi Luo horned beast, gained 150 experience. Ding! Defeated Julang insect, gained 250 experience. Ding! Defeated giant troll, gained 450 experience. Ding! Quest to battle blue completed. Reward, 500 experience. Summon card, troll. Experience from fighting monsters? Ted didn't pause to look at the summoned card prize. He noticed 2 glowing cards on the corpses. Wait here, I'll check, he said, sliding down the sloped stairs. He circled the troll, blocking the corridor, pretended to examine the Zhulang insect's body, and casually picked up a faintly green, glowing card from its corpse. Then he reached over and took a white glowing card from the Chi-Luo horned beast's corpse. These two are dead, but that strange troll was alive, he said when he returned. Should we tell the professors? Ron asked. I say we run, Jerry whispered. Hermione rolled her eyes. You think the professors won't ask the portraits and find us? After the adrenaline of the fight, a new terror set in, being caught by the staff. Neville immediately looked terrified. How about we just give ourselves up? Before anyone could answer, a sinister voice echoed from around the corner. Longbottom, don't you think it's a little late to surrender? Not only Snape, but Professors McGonagall and Flitwick had appeared. Good heavens, what have you lot been doing? McGonagall was normally unflappable, but seeing Neville leaning on a blood-stained longsword, the strange beast in a pool of gore, the odd insect in a puddle of yellowish fluid, and a giant troll sprawled across the corridor had genuinely shaken her. When had Hogwarts turned into a battlefield? They all reached the top of the landing and saw the staircase still slick and sloped. Finite incantatum. Snape casually ended Ted's skidding jinx. You defeated a troll? And what are these two? McGonagall's voice sharpened. Ron and Jerry puffed their chests out at what sounded like praise, but Snape's venom cut in. Ha! Presumptuous show-offs, foolish Gryffindors. What idiocy is this? Did you come here to commit suicide by hunting trolls? Snape was seething. Ted watched the muscles in his face twitch. His glare was the kind that made it look as if he wanted to obliviate them all. Harry stepped forward as their leader. He spoke sincerely to the professors. I'm sorry, professors. I've let you down. It was my fault my friends were in danger. I originally wanted to use the restroom. I dragged Hermione along, and they came because they were worried I might get into trouble. Hermione jumped in immediately. Yes, it was my idea to come here. The corridors are quieter. I'm sorry. It's my fault. A weak but clever excuse. Bathroom business. Far-fetched but defensible. The professors couldn't punish friends worrying about one another or girls who needed the loo. Ron and Jerry exchanged surprised looks. Hermione had just lied to the professors, and they were silently grateful. They'd been led astray for sure. Good study habits were hard to adopt. Lying and scheming came much easier. All right, although there are extenuating circumstances, there will still be penalties. McGonagall looked to the other two. Gryffindor will lose 50 points. Even among her own house, she was strict. Flitwick, uneasy about showing favoritism, added, Ravenclaw will lose 20 points, 10 points per person. Snape was visibly unsatisfied. He stared at Ted, Neville, and Ron with a look that promised he'd have liked nothing better than to rough them up himself. 46. House elves like me. It's only an hour until curfew. Don't run around, got it? Oh, and by the way, that skidding jinx was excellent, and the location was impeccable. Professor Flitwick whispered the last bit to Ted, clearly proud of his star student. Watching their dean bounce away, Ted and the others laughed. The three monsters had already been taken by the professors, and they still had a little free time. Neville reluctantly stuffed the longsword, cleaned with a scouring charm, back into the armor's hand. Tonight's events, especially that one strike, had shaken him. Something inside him felt different. Ron shrugged with a bitter look. I didn't even get enough to eat. Couldn't Professor Quirrell have shown up later? Just 3 monsters. What's all the fuss about? Everyone shot him looks that said, You're getting arrogant pretty fast, kid. Jerry produced a piece of cheese from his pocket. Want some? Ron tossed it straight into his mouth. Got any more? Jerry rolled his eyes. Do I look like a house elf from the kitchens to you? Hermione took out the small stash of food Ted had given them earlier, only a few meat pies, not enough for everyone. Ted suggested, Why don't we head to the kitchens for a proper meal? We can celebrate our first victory. As soon as food was mentioned, Ron and Jerry were instantly on board. You still remember where the kitchens are? Harry asked. Come with me, I'll show you. Ted led the way toward the Hufflepuff common room. A fruit portrait. Ah! Here it is. He found the famed fruit painting. Not far away stood 2 rows of oak barrels. Hermione pointed. I heard the Hufflepuff common room door is hidden behind the barrels. Harry chimed in. You have to tap the barrels in a certain rhythm. Get it wrong, and you get sprayed with vinegar. Seems like being tone-deaf isn't easy in Hufflepuff either. Ted pointed at the portrait. I heard if you tickle this pair gently, it opens the door. Ted reached out and used his eagle's hand. The pair trembled more and more until it popped out and became a doorknob. Ted turned it, and the door opened. Inside the round archway lay the vast Hogwarts kitchen, where dozens of house elves, wrapped in patched pillowcases bearing the school crest, were bustling about. When they saw Ted and his friends, the house elves lit up. Little wizards, is there anything we can do to help the little wizards? Their wide eyes shone with hope. The Halloween feast they'd been preparing had been ruined by Professor Quirrell, and they were disappointed. Doing something else to help would lift their spirits. Ted asked gently, for some reason, we didn't get enough to eat. Is there anything we can have? Yes, yes, yes! Several house elves hurried forward, and others already began bringing plates to set on the long tables. Enough, enough! Seeing a new feast about to be laid out at great expense, Ted quickly put a stop to their frantic hospitality. You don't need to prepare a feast just for us, he said kindly. A house elf who hadn't yet been assigned a task asked cautiously, would you like something to drink? Oh, juice would be wonderful. If not, it's still very kind of you, Ted replied. Yes, we have apple juice, pumpkin juice, grape juice, orange juice. They were soon conquered by the impromptu mini-feast. The feeling was simply too good. Ron attacked a chicken leg, Jerry shoved giant chunks of cheese into his mouth, Harry ate with fierce appetite, Neville devoured everything in sight, and even Hermione, influenced by the hunger and the mood, ate more than usual. Ted praised each dish, finding something to compliment in everything, repeatedly thanking the house elves, and even raising a small toast to wish them a happy Halloween. 40 or 50 house elves gathered around the table, staring at Ted with adoring eyes. His charm and compliments had won their goodwill. They were practically in tears with gratitude. This Halloween had turned out to be a very happy one for them. While Ted and his friends feasted, the professors were still dealing with the aftermath. The three monsters had accidentally escaped from Professor Quirrell's lab. 2 were dead, 1 wounded, and the professors had handled them. Dumbledore, however, could not allow Quirrell to continue experimenting with dangerous creatures at Hogwarts, not things like trolls. In the headmaster's office, Dumbledore spoke with a sullen-looking Snape. I don't understand why you allowed him to become the Defense Against the Dark Arts professor, Snape said, bitter. The appointment had ruined something long wanted. Dumbledore, as ever, was calm. Severus, I have my reasons. Faced with that calm old face, Snape had no good reply. He was deeply dissatisfied. After all, he had betrayed Voldemort to save Lily, and yet when an informant threatened the Order of the Phoenix, Dumbledore, who had promised to protect Lily, had been unable to stop her death. He could hardly pretend to show Dumbledore a friendly face. He stayed at the school only because Dumbledore had convinced him, always with the argument of protecting Lily's daughter. He didn't want anything to do with the White Demon King. Snape added coldly, I checked the 3rd floor room on my way out. The door was open. Cerberus attacked the intruders. Dumbledore inclined his head. I know. Snape snorted and turned to leave. As he reached the door, Dumbledore quietly said, Please keep a close eye on Professor Quirrell for me. You suspect him, and yet you let him teach in the castle? Snape's tone was sharp. Think of today's released monsters and those foolish Gryffindors roaming the halls. How could it be safe with such people around Harry? Dumbledore only replied, Severus, I have my reasons. Damn your reasons. Snape slammed the door as he left. The students didn't know the full drama of 6 little wizards versus 3 monsters. Ravenclaw certainly didn't. Gryffindor, don't expect Harry, Ron, and Jerry to pass up a chance to boast about their glorious deeds. Ted's group, meanwhile, remained calm. After parting with Hermione, they returned to their dorms. After washing up, Ted rewarded Ansu with a white mouse as a treat. Thanks to Ansu's help tonight, he'd gained valuable insight into both himself and his enemies. His roommate was stunned, especially Terry Boot, who had been fascinated by Ansu. Terry had fed white mice before, thinking of them as special pets. He hadn't expected they might be fodder for Ansu. His dreams were shattered. You actually eat mice, so gracefully too. He quickly changed his tune and begged Ted to let him feed Ansu personally. That night, Ted skipped his usual meditation and began tallying his gains from the evening. The experience from killing the monsters alone was 150 plus 250 plus 450 plus a 500-point quest reward, and then the white card dropped by the Chiluo Horned Beast, an experience card that grants 100 experience when used. In other words, tonight he had gained 1,450 experience points, more than he'd accumulated since the semester began. This was absurdly lucrative. Killing monsters and getting cards, now that's a good business model. Secondly, Ted also obtained 2 other cards. Chapter 47, Material Cards and Summon Cards. The card that burst out of the Chi Luo Horned Beast was an experience card, white, a card specifically for converting into experience points. It gave him extra XP. Earlier, when the quest reward offered 3 choices, a blue card had appeared. That blue card had been worth 1,000 experience. The card that popped from the Julang insect showed a large, yellow-green insect carapace with protrusions and spikes. Chitinous carapace, green, material card. A special magical insect carapace, highly resistant to both physical and magical attacks, large in area yet lightweight. Looking at it, Ted was inexplicably reminded of Cell. The card from the quest reward depicted a yellow-green giant troll scratching its sparsely haired head with one hand while holding a huge club. Troll, blue. Summon card. Summon a troll to fight for you. Duration 10 minutes. Cooldown 10 hours. Note, the troll's intelligence is limited. Don't give it vague commands. Both were types Ted had never seen before. Material cards could manifest as usable materials, metals, herbs, ores, or serve as special materials to enhance other cards. Cards could be upgraded by consuming other cards or experience points. Material cards could add effects or bonuses when used that way. Summon cards were straightforward. Call a creature to fight for you. Trolls are particularly dangerous to ordinary wizards because their magic resistance is high. Put one under command, and the threat multiplies. Ted grinned. He had just made a huge profit. After collecting everything from the fight, Ted's experience pool read 4,500 XP. He felt the urge to level up again. If he did, his magic rank would move from level 3 to level 4 with the wand bonus. The improvement would be massive. Spells like the Skidding Jinx could last 5 or 6 minutes without fading. The 2 ice arrows had been impressively strong, but he held back. Today was the last day of October. New Otherworld knowledge would arrive tomorrow. Better to wait and see what came with the update before spending XP. Besides the loot, the battle had given him other thoughts. The 3 magical monsters had been immensely powerful. An ordinary person, without a heavy firearm, couldn't have defeated the weakest Chi Luo Horned Beast. The giant troll would have killed anyone without anti-material weapons. Its charging speed alone was terrifying. It moved like a car at 80 yards, and ordinary caliber guns couldn't stop it immediately. A squad could be wiped out in minutes without the right tools. But a few little wizards who controlled the right spells could handle it. Wizards who had mastered their magic had a decisive edge over magical beasts. No wonder centaurs were confined to their reserves, giants were driven into deep mountains, goblins handled the finances at Gringotts and were kept from using wands, and dragons were basically farmed. Early the next morning, Ted's biological clock woke him. As he opened his eyes, the system chimed. Ding! Talent, Otherworld knowledge, triggered, discovered, Sule Bubble Alchemy recipe notes, green. Recorded the alchemical potion experience of the gnome Sule Pao Bubble, a journeyman alchemy trainer in Ironforge. Redeemable for 270 XP. Ted blinked. Another Azeroth product. He couldn't have recalled Sule Pao Bubble by name, who remembered every trainer, but knowing he was a journeyman alchemy trainer was enough. In Warcraft, alchemy made potions and useful concoctions. A journeyman trainer would have many valuable potion recipes. 270 XP was a bargain. Ted spent the experience and the notes flowed into his mind. Worth it. Absolutely worth it. Even 500 or 1,000 XP would have been a steal. From the notes, he roughly recovered 20 potion recipes. Minor healing potion, elixir of lion's strength, weak troll's blood potion, minor agility potion, defense potion, blackmouth oil, elixir of growth, elixir of wisdom, underwater breathing potion, minor magic resistance potion, healing potion, lesser mana potion, anti-venom, lesser troll's blood potion, fire oil, fire protection potion, lesser invisibility potion, swiftness potion, greater defense potion, free action potion. 6 of those, fire oil, fire protection potion, lesser invisibility potion, swiftness potion, greater defense potion, and free action potion, were mid to high level recipes. In the magic world, they were comparable to powerful combat grade potions, because Azeroth was a place where small wars and world-ending events happened regularly. Most of its techniques were combat-oriented. All 20 recipes were practical in a fight: healing, strength enhancement, rapid recovery, agility boosts, defense, anti-venom, magic, and fire resistance. Extremely useful. The only issue now was sourcing the original herbs and materials. Some Azeroth ingredients didn't appear in the magic world, and it wasn't clear why that was. Still, having the recipes made Ted immediately think about focusing more on potions. If he could apply precise chemical measurement, a dropper to measure milligrams instead of vague a drop or 1 or 2, potion making would become far more exact. Ted smiled at the thought of turning alchemy into a science. After his morning jog by the Black Lake, his companion Ansu soared overhead, swooping and teasing the gulls with agile dives. Ted returned to the dorm, showered, changed into fresh clothes, and met Hermione in the Great Hall. Their friends hadn't arrived yet. Ted was reading an extracurricular book, detailed explanation of potion progress, while Hermione studied transfiguration. The events of last night had ignited something in her. It was the first time she had really seen magic applied practically, and her enthusiasm for learning was plain to see. Soon the Gryffindor quartet arrived, yawning. They'd been too excited the night before. After staging a victory feast in the kitchens, they'd stayed up in the common room, telling stories to the younger students until midnight. It had been quite a spectacle. Predictably, many of the usual breakfast regulars were absent. Those who did come peered at Ted and his friends like expectant fans, eager for another adventure. Hannah from Hufflepuff leaned over and whispered, "Hey Ted, I heard you fought a gigantic troll last night. You nearly died killing 3 monsters? The whole corridor was covered in blood. Is that true?" Ted looked taken aback. The way she told it, he'd just returned from Verdun. "Who told you that?" he asked. Hermione glanced over and shot Ron and the others an accusing look. "I heard it from Lee Jordan," Hannah said excitedly. "Lots of people in our house heard." Ted quickly put them at ease. "No, it's nowhere near as dramatic as that. We used a lot of magic, and it was only with great difficulty that we managed to hold on until the professors arrived." Around them, Ron, Jerry, and the others exchanged embarrassed looks, as the story had already grown far beyond the facts. Ted recalled something the Weasley twins had said: "Tell Lee Jordan anything, and the whole school would know." He was Hogwarts' loudspeaker. After finally seeing off several waves of curious students, from first years to third years, the Great Hall buzzed with questions and jokes. "Ron, did you really cast the levitation charm?" one student asked. "Jerry, why do you even copy homework?" another teased. Ron reddened and defended himself. The wand movement for levitation has 4 points: relax, loosen, flick, shake. Do you know them? Jerry shrugged as if serious. "Copying homework? It's just referencing. You have to learn to cite your sources." For the first period of the morning, the hall was full of laughter and chatter. Ted hadn't expected his group of 6 to provide so much entertainment. There weren't many diversions at the school, and apparently that made any excitement a big event. "Coach, I want to run!" "Coach, I want to run!" As classes wound down, Ted pulled Neville aside and whispered, "Neville, do you want to get stronger?" Before Neville could answer, Ted felt his own words had come out embarrassingly corny, like some shady fellow in a long coat at a train station asking, "Hey brother, want some discs?" He shook his head, collected himself, and tried again more seriously. "Do you want to be able to stand up and protect your friends when it matters? If so, run with me." It sounded way too much like a line out of a shonen anime. Ted could feel his cheeks burning, but he didn't wait for Neville's reply and hurried off, replaying Neville's sword strike from last night in his head. It had been spectacular. Stunning, really. Neville had shown the raw potential of a Gryffindor swordsman. Come to think of it, Gryffindors always seemed to have a knack for close combat. Harry had slayed a basilisk with a sword at 12. Ron had thrown himself into wizard's chess like a true knight, driving a stone knight to counter enemy pieces, and later even crashing a flying car into the humping willow. Hermione punched Malfoy. Neville had sliced Nagini. They were all reckless in their own way, but there was something knightly about them. If Neville had been raised on a different path, say, following Gandalf instead of bad influences, he might have become a great combat archmage. It wasn't too late, though. With proper training, his wand use could become instinctive, like wielding a lightsaber. Jedi wizard wasn't out of the question. Despite the clumsiness, Neville was reliable. After thinking it over for a morning, he told Ted he wanted to be stronger and to protect his friends. He wanted to run. That kind of commitment was admirable. So for the next week, rain or shine, Neville showed up. One morning of torrential rain, he got up early and waited for Ted at the main gate. His example even rubbed off on his doormates. Ron and Jerry, normally lazy, procrastinating sorts, followed along, sheepish but determined. "Coach, I want to play basketball," Ron joked. "No, we want to get stronger," they added. Running to get stronger wasn't a joke for Ted. Physical fitness is a wizard's foundation, especially for younger students whose magic is still developing. Casting spells uses magic, and channeling magic takes a toll on the body. You can't just spam spells without paying attention to the mana cost. Most of a young wizard's magical growth is innate. Bloodlines, ancestry. Ted didn't know exactly how the first wizards came into being or where magic first came from, but he was aware of the importance of lineage. Families like the Weasleys, the Potters, and the Longbottoms had a reputation for magical talent. Ted had already noticed a slight disadvantage in Jerry, a gap that would likely widen as they grew older. By the 5th or 6th year, it could be stark. That didn't mean bloodline was destiny. Pure blood obsession had a long history of producing idiots and hereditary disease, and some of the greatest wizards came from mixed or muggle-born backgrounds. Voldemort and Hermione were awkward examples for different reasons, but they showed mixed lineages could produce power. If the purebloods were smart, they'd recruit talented people from all backgrounds like sensible nations do, instead of burning bridges and sealing their own decline. Back to the point. Running would improve their bodies, which would help their magic. It wouldn't erase inherited limits, but it could help them get as close as possible to their potential. Ted wasn't just making them jog. He was following exercises from the Body Strengthening Manual. With steady training, their fitness would improve year by year, and soon the difference between them and the average student would be obvious. Being stronger and fitter would at least make dealing with Malfoy's gang easier. Better physical condition also meant smoother, less taxing spellcasting. And, with Hermione around, their homework was always done on time. She'd nag incessantly until it was. The group learned to finish their assignments at the first opportunity to avoid Hermione's relentless homework harassment. That afternoon, they finished at the library and headed to their secret base, an abandoned classroom. Since they weren't all in the same house, their shared time was limited to places like the Great Hall, the library, or this empty room. On the way, Harry brought up what Fred, George, and Lee Jordan had told them the day before. They hadn't been the only ones sneaking out on Halloween Eve. The twins and Lee had gone back to the third-floor room where the three-headed dog, the Cerberus, had been. They'd always felt something major was hidden in there and had been poking around persistently. When they returned, they'd nearly been caught by Snape, who had also gone to check the room. He'd opened the door, glanced in, and left. Harry frowned. Is Snape really so interested in that Cerberus? Hermione offered a practical suggestion. Maybe the dog's fur is a valuable potion ingredient. Jerry's eyes widened. So Snape went to steal dog hair? Ron was outraged on principle. If a professor can steal, we can steal too. Immediately, both Ron and Jerry pictured the Cerberus as a glittering gold mine of galleons. No one needed reminding of the Weasleys' finances. Ron's annual pocket money wouldn't buy a decent quill. Jerry had been working for his family before arriving at Hogwarts. The Rat Ear tribe and other demi-human families still hadn't integrated into the wizarding world and were generally poor. Ted tried to point out that Snape was probably well off and had a lab full of potion ingredients. But Ron wasn't having it. He swore on the wand he'd inherited from Bill. It must be a monster Snape released as a cover so he could shave the Cerberus. Ted sighed inwardly. In Ron's eyes, Snape's ambitions were always petty and sneaky. That wasn't entirely unfair. Snape did seem to single Ron out in class more than the others. Ted muttered to himself, "Maybe don't sit next to Harry next year, Ron. If Lily's daughter is sitting next to someone who looks like an idiot, Snape's temper flares. And try not to make so many dramatic vows. You never know when you'll be embarrassing yourself by keeping one." In the abandoned classroom, Neville was practicing with a wooden sword Ted had transfigured. Ted had him do both two-handed and one-handed forms, and the sword was left-handed on purpose. Ideally, a swordsman would want a wand in one hand and a blade in the other. If a wand ever turned into a lightsaber, the choice would be obvious. Jerry and Ron were occupied with wizard's chess, with Harry offering tactical advice. Together, they were enough to make the chess pieces grumble. The two of them couldn't beat Ron's aggressive style, and Ron's pieces were itching for a fight. "Little Ronnie, let me go. I'll finish it with one stroke," the carved figures seemed to say. Ted and Hermione sat nearby, reading and taking notes. Ron, after decisively finishing off Jerry and Harry's kings, stretched contentedly. "You two should practice more," he said. "Next time, I'll give you an extra rook." Jerry responded with a middle finger. Harry rolled his eyes. Ron took their disdain as a compliment and smiled. Then he noticed Neville sweating and concentrating on his swings, and Ted and Hermione bent over their books. He felt a pang of being outclassed by their diligence. "Don't you guys ever get tired of reading in your free time?" he complained. Hermione didn't even look up. "Learning and solving puzzles give me a great sense of accomplishment." Ted shrugged. "It's like when you win at wizard's chess." Ron pouted. "Why didn't you say that earlier? I would have understood then." Ted waved them over. "All right, break time. Come here. I'll tell you a secret." Neville, wiping his brow, shuffled over, and Harry and Ron joined them. Ted lowered his voice theatrically. "Do you know that every minute that passes on Big Ben in London, 60 seconds pass everywhere else in the world?" Neville blinked earnestly. "It's true." Everyone else stared at Neville, then at Ted. "Huh? Are you serious?" Listening to them, Ted thought, they all sound like a bunch of skeptics. 49. Quidditch and chaos magic. It was anyone's guess what butterfly effect had turned Ted's interest in broomsticks cold, leaving him with only a lukewarm opinion of Quidditch. Sirius had never been able to forgive it. Whether or not Ted would have been chosen for the team in his first year didn't matter. The matches went on, and the first Saturday of November brought the first big game of the season. Hogwarts' Quidditch schedule was customary. The four houses split into two groups, each pair meeting once between Halloween and Christmas and once between Christmas and Easter, then swapping opponents for the next half of the year. After Easter, the top two teams from those matches met in the end-of-year final. Games were usually held on Saturdays. Ted grumbled about that. Weekends were for rest, not team sports, but nobody listened. Gryffindor and Slytherin had always been the powerhouses, the fixtures everyone expected to see thrash one another 3 times a year. Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff mostly came along for the ride. This year's first marquee match was Gryffindor versus Slytherin, refereed by Madam Hooch from Flying, and colorfully called by Lee Jordan, the school's loudmouth announcer, with dark skin and dreadlocks and a voice that could sell anything. The sheer enthusiasm for Quidditch among students and professors alike was alien to both Hermione and Ted. By early morning, while Ted was still out jogging, students were already making their way to the pitch to stake out seats. It was silly, of course. The whole school numbered only a little over 200, and the 7th years were away on internships, but for Hogwarts, it felt massive. By 9, the stands were full. Robes of red, green, blue, and yellow made clear swathes in the crowd. On the pitch, the Slytherin players looked like they'd been forged for contact sports, big and burly, making the match look more like aerial rugby than Quidditch. Gryffindor fielded a smaller, scrappier side. 3 girls among them, Oliver Wood as captain, and the Weasley twins among the chasers. With Ted absent, the seeker slot was filled by some unknown boy. Without the savior present, there were none of the melodramas, no Quirrell theatrics, no Snape misreadings, no costume-burning mishaps. The game was straightforward and ugly. Slytherin fouled constantly, playing a dirty, unsportsmanlike match. Gryffindor lost badly. The defeat left all the Gryffindors furious. Slytherin's behavior drew curses from housemates and professors alike. Malfoy, accompanied by his usual cronies, swaggered over to gloat, crowing about Slytherin's great victory. Things escalated fast. Someone, Jerry, tripped Malfoy from behind, sending him face first into the turf. Ron answered with a righteous punch to Malfoy's jaw. Players who had just left the field found themselves in a second off-field match. Fists flew and shouts rose. Malfoy's trio, outnumbered and routed, fled in a disheveled, muddy heap. They escaped only because Gryffindor didn't tear them limb from limb. The loss hit Gryffindor hard. Even Professor McGonagall brooded about it for days. Ted, however, shrugged and carried on with his life and his studies. After confirming the month's otherworld knowledge, he leveled up again. He was now a level 3 wizard and level 1 mind mage. The experience progression had been steep, 1,000 XP to reach level 2, then another 2,000 to reach level 3, a total of 3,000. Ted still had 1,686 experience points sitting in his pool. The level-up rewards gave him 1 attribute point, which he put into intelligence, and 1 skill point, which he invested in magic. That boosted his magic to level 4, and with his wand, he gained an extra +1, putting his effective wand-backed magic at level 5, a level many adult wizards couldn't reach. Ted's internal reservoir of magical energy felt vast, almost inexhaustible. Part of that was because the spells he knew were low-level and inexpensive to cast. His recovered magic replenished much of what he used, letting him practice for long periods. The more he used and trained his spells, the faster they rose in level. Several of his combat spells had already reached level 2, Frost Armor, Ice Arrow, and Shield Charm among them. Lately, he had been poring over arcane spells, Dalaran Battle Mage work in particular, and he felt close to mastering his first true arcane formula. Then, while rummaging through an obscure corner of the library, he found a peculiar handwritten grimoire, The Joy of Chaos. It was a copy of a manuscript by a Muggle, Austin Osmond Spare, written in the 1970s. Spare had grown up exposed to magic. His neighbor was a witch, and later married into that world. His book presented magic from a Muggle's perspective and explored whether Muggles might wield magic at all. Spare would later become a well-known mystic in the non-magical world, founding what he called chaos magic. Chaos magic, Spare argued, wasn't the apocalyptic chaos of myth or the chaotic gods of fantasy. Its core idea was simple and unsettling. The world is fundamentally unknowable. No single system, science, faith, or any other belief can claim total truth because human perception is limited and partial. What we see is only a slice of reality filtered by our minds. That subjectivity gives willpower primacy. Gods and myths arise because people cannot abide randomness. They prefer to believe in some controlling force, even if it's capricious. Chaos magic refused to treat deities as objective masters. Chaos signified the rejection of fixed rules, institutions, and dogma. Magic here was the art of shaping reality through focused will. From that premise came a bold, almost anarchic practice. Belief itself is a tool. If you treat a thing, no matter how ridiculous, a cartoon hero, a mass-market toy, as an object of devotion, and invest it with intention by ritualized attention, that concentration of will could yield effects in the world. It resembled what some psychologists later called the law of attraction. Thoughts, repeatedly focused on, tend to pull reality into alignment with themselves. Chaos magic dismissed warnings of karmic threefold returns as psychological baggage. Consequences were only as real as the caster believed them to be. The copy Ted held was Spare's original manuscript and went into great detail on what he called will magic. Reading it left Ted oddly dazed. The common equation in the magical community was always magic power plus will. Spare's book seemed to say that will alone, if wielded cleverly, might be enough. That sounded ridiculous if taken as pure idealism. In a purely material world, sheer desire shouldn't bend steel. Yet if what Spare described was more like a manipulation of mind power, subtle and psychological, it began to feel plausible. Ted tucked the manuscript under his arm and left the library with his head buzzing. The possibilities were both alluring and unnerving. Thanks to fellow reader Tianxinjian YQ for the 666 reward. Thank you. 50. Librarian's Legacy. This kind of free idealism was surprisingly practical for a mind mage. Ted decided to use it as a concept to develop some psionic abilities. Every day he woke early to run and exercise, finished his tasks and gained experience in class, and when he didn't have lessons, he either experimented with magic or researched books and organized notes in the library. For leisure, he chatted with his companions and joined group activities. One afternoon, Ted and Hermione were reading in the library. Harry and Ron had finished their homework and slipped away long ago. Even though the homework was done, Ted had formed a habit of collecting a stack of books so he could access them easily in his mind. He read so fast, Hermione hadn't even finished one book while a pile was already building beside him. Among the things he skimmed were Identification of Magical Woods and Care of Bowtruckles, which discussed wand woods and how to harvest them without harming bowtruckles. Do Not Force Yourself Upon a Unicorn, the cautionary tale of a talented wizard obsessed with unicorns who tried to seize one and had his leg broken. Accidental Potion Awards, a humorous compilation of brew-gone-wrong mishaps that caused drinkers to fly, float, or spout colorful fountains. Transfiguration Error Collection, chronicling a dozen disastrous transfiguration mistakes. 11 of the wizards never fully recovered. Useless Spell Collection, listing over 20 entirely pointless charms, including the fart sound spell, and Werewolf Postpartum Care, which claimed that if two werewolves conceived on a full moon night, their child would be a controllable werewolf able to transform at will. Whoever discovered that was either brave or reckless. Too much useless knowledge, Ted muttered, closing the book. Hermione leaned over and whispered, "Come with me. I found a strange place." They threaded past rows of tall, dark brown stacks that looked like walls until they reached a secluded alcove. On the wall was a faded slogan, "Maintain proper etiquette in the library, Hermingster." "I asked Madam Pince," Hermione whispered. Hermingster was a librarian over 100 years ago. "You think the slogan is hiding something?" Ted asked. Hermione nodded. "It makes no sense to leave a slogan in such a hidden place for a century." "All right, let's try." Ted flicked his wand and said, "Revilio." The slogan glowed faint blue, except not all the letters lit up. Hermione grinned. She caught on in a few seconds. She pointed her wand at the glowing letters until they formed the word quiet. Then many small characters appeared beneath the slogan on the wall. Ted received a system reward, 55 experience points. The puzzle had been solved. He memorized the glyphs in seconds. It was a spell, an invention of the old librarian, who apparently could not stand noisy students. The spell silenced everything within its casting range. Speech, footsteps, any sound at all vanished. Ted pocketed the memory and urged Hermione, "Let's get out of here and study it properly." In the abandoned classroom, he copied down the spell. "It's not difficult," he noted, "but it's effective. I don't remember anything like it." When Ted and Hermione told the others about solving the riddle, Harry and the rest were a little annoyed. School offered so few diversions, and puzzle solving was one of the most fun. The spells themselves were secondary. It was the thrill of figuring things out that they loved. By the end of November, Ted had finally cast Arcane Wisdom, a spell that had required the brave sacrifice of 6 white mice. The mice had been made dull-witted by the magic, but apparently that had not affected their flavor. Ansu would still savor them in the end. Let us remember their contribution. Arcane Wisdom granted the caster a +2 intelligence buff to the target for 30 minutes. It could be cast on others, and it had almost no cooldown. Stacked with his Ravenclaw's Wisdom, blue buff, that made +4 intelligence and +1 spirit, enough to turn even a slow mind into a genius for a short while. Under both buffs, Ted's intelligence attribute jumped to 11, more than double an ordinary person. His thoughts raced. Memory and comprehension expanded as if his brain had switched to quad-core, dual-channel mode. Research that had once been slow and repetitive suddenly flowed. Where before he might need days to make breakthroughs, now a few minutes of focused thought yielded insight. He even thought he could parse Frost Nova's casting pattern in a few hours. The state of flow was intoxicating. Research felt wonderful. That realization relaxed Ted. He knew he wasn't a natural top student. He was diligent, mature-minded, and supported by external advantages. But that cheat had helped him reach a level where, even without it, he could become one of the best. He still had otherworld knowledge as well. For the first time since arriving from a Muggle orphanage, he felt confident rather than constantly anxious about failing. The prospect of fighting Death Eaters in the future still loomed, but for now he could breathe. His companions noticed the change. "Ted seems a lot more relaxed," Harry said. "Before he was so tense, like he was about to spring." "Yeah," Ron agreed. "He seemed to try to squeeze studying out of every second. It looked exhausting." Hermione added, "He's kept the same routine, but his mindset has definitely loosened." Ted hadn't realized his anxious drive had rubbed off on them. "Sorry I worried you. I hadn't figured things out earlier, but I'm more relaxed now," he said. Neville patted his shoulder. Jerry laughed. "We were all terrified when school started, worried one wrong move would see us expelled. Being with you lot helped. You just took a bit longer to loosen up." With the temporary boosts, Ted's research sped up, and he revisited his chaos psionic development model. It worked well. Building on the silencing spells concept, he developed a set of related psionic abilities. Illusory sound, shaping psionic energy to produce convincing, localized sounds in a given area. Message, a whisper sent to a target at a distance that others cannot hear. False voice, altering or imitating a target's voice or other sounds. These were purely psionic, no wands, no verbal cues, making them discreet and useful. November passed quietly, and December arrived. On the first of the month, a system notification chimed. "Ding! The talent Otherworld Knowledge has been triggered, discovering 3-ring Red Robe Wizard Penny's Spellbook Blue." 3-ring Red Robe Wizard Penny's spellbook contained the magical studies of the 3-ring Red Robe Wizard Penny. It required 550 experience to exchange. 3-ring Red Robe? Ted wondered if it was magic from a D&D-like world. He didn't hesitate. He spent 550 experience points. Complex spell models and reams of arcane information flooded his mind. 51. Spellbook of the Red-Robed Wizard, Penny of the 3 Rings, Blue. D&D is a broad setting with many worlds that share similar rules. The Red-Robed Wizards belong to Thay's Red Robe Society, which places this squarely in the Forgotten Realms. In that world, magic users are governed by something called spell slots. It isn't just a limitation. Through the weave, spell slots actually make learning and casting spells easier, serving as a framework. Legendary wizards often find ways to bypass those restrictions, and there are extraordinary things like legendary spells that rival or surpass magic users from other worlds. Many wizards there have even attained godhood. By local standards, most practitioners would be considered sorcerers. Wizards are those who master every detail of spells through study and research. Sorcerers rely on instinct and bloodline. A few individuals born with magical bloodlines may qualify as both. Famous archmages, think the great spellcasters of Netheril, had startling intellects. The lowest recorded intelligence among them was 17, which was already considered poor. Many were 22 to 24. To put it in terms a Muggle would understand, if the average IQ is about 90 to 110 and 140 plus is genius, those archmages would be off the scale, perhaps 220 to 240. Ted estimated that with his buffs, his own effective IQ would be around 150 to 180. Without buffs, with his current intelligence, he could learn at most up to 3rd-level 9-ring spells. Knowing signature 3rd-level spells like Invisibility and Fireball puts you at the entry level of a true magic user. Below that, you're barely worth mentioning. But Ted could still raise his intelligence by leveling up, so his future wasn't hopeless. Ted skimmed through Penny's spellbook and felt a rush of excitement. For someone only at 3rd level, Penny had collected and researched an astonishing number of spells, over 60 from cantrips to 3rd level. Learning spells on Faerun was prohibitively expensive. Whether you apprenticed or bought scrolls, spells cost a fortune, and the system is so vast that access is often limited. A wizard in some remote place might never know more than 20 spells in a lifetime. The Red-Robed Society was notorious for power and oppression. Wizards ran the country, shaping agriculture and weather with magic, and treating apprentices like cattle in a ruthless meritocracy. They mass-trained students and culled the weak. Survivors became elites. They even ran assembly lines for magic items. In that environment, a 3rd-level wizard would be barely middle management, yet Penny had a wealth of spells. Ted wondered if Penny might have connections, maybe the mistress of some higher-rank wizard, acquiring spells through back channels. What impressed him most was the breadth of Penny's repertoire. He didn't pigeonhole himself into one school the way many red-robed wizards did. Prophecy, transmutation, conjuration, evocation, everything was there. Ted even found a third-level spell he'd never heard of. Animal cuteness. Animal cuteness temporarily transforms a single animal or magical beast into a younger, cuter version of itself. He couldn't help laughing at the oddness, but the variety drove home a truth. A prepared magic user is almost unbeatable. Under the limitation of spell slots, the art of preparation, choosing the right spells to meet likely situations, is the real test. Someone who filled all their slots with Fireball wouldn't last 3 chapters in most campaigns. 400 experience points for this spellbook felt like a steal. Converting Farron's spell mechanics to the casting system of his own world would be tricky, but the haul was still enormous. During History of Magic, Ted's mind kept wandering. Even the cantrips in the book numbered more than 10. He froze, overwhelmed with choices. Hermione nudged his elbow. "What's wrong with you? You've been spacing out the whole class. Aren't you taking notes?" Ted cleared his throat. "I was thinking about magic stuff and got distracted." Hermione eyed him. He'd been like this at the start of the last month, and the month before that. She made a mental note. He always had something going on at the beginning of each month. By breakfast the next morning, the boys came back from their run, changing and joking. Neville said softly, "Hermione, your stern face and pursed lips remind me of someone." Ron nodded. "Neville's right. You're like Professor McGonagall," Jerry snorted. "No way. Professor McGonagall's the big Hermione." Hermione's eyes flashed. "You three," Neville protested. "I didn't." Just then the male owls arrived in a flurry, wings beating overhead. If you were unlucky, you'd get a feathered shower. Ted flicked his wand and muttered a levitation charm so fast Ron didn't hear it properly. Their old family owl, Errol, hovered a foot above Ron's soup bowl rather than plunging headfirst into the steaming chowder. Errol had been with the Weasleys for over 20 years and was definitely showing his age. Ted didn't want to see the old bird hurt. Hermione took Errol aside, fed him some pumpkin juice to revive him, and scolded Ron. "You should let him retire. I'm worried the next time the weather's bad, you'll lose him." Ron rolled his eyes. "Easy for you to say. My family needs the money." The Weasleys had a lot of mouths to feed. Mrs. Weasley ran the household, and Mr. Sky Weasley was the only earner. They were always tight on funds. Ron tore open his letter and shrugged. "Looks like I'll have to stay at school for Christmas. Mum and Dad are going to Egypt to see Bill, so George and I will have to stay." Christmas was still about 20 days away, but news of plans spread quickly, and everyone began talking about the holiday. Ted had nowhere to go. He'd definitely stay at school. Jerry felt the same. Staying would ease his mother's burden. Ron had to stay. Hermione, Harry, and Neville were going home. In the West, Christmas was as important as the Spring Festival in many places, and families were eager to see the children, especially in their first year away at school. On the way to class after breakfast, Hermione hesitated and then offered, "You could come to my house for Christmas, you know. My dad likes you. He's been saying he wants to find a chance to thank you." She tried to sound casual, careful not to hurt his pride. "Thanks, Hermione. That's really kind of you, but I think I'll experience Christmas at school. Ron and Jerry will be here, and I want to see what a magical Christmas is like. Don't worry about me." "All right. Then remember to write. The holiday's 3 weeks away." "Oh, right." Spell list found in Penny's book. 0th level cantrips, Mage Hand, Mending, Daze, Flare, Arcane Mark, Prestidigitation, Detect Magic, Read Magic, Message, Ray of Frost. 1st level, Arcane Lock, Comprehend Languages, Detect Secret Doors, Detect Magical Beasts, Evil Protection, Shield, Mage Armor, Grease, Stonefall, Unseen Servant, Floating Disc, Animate Rope, Grease Souls, Shrink Item, Scatter, Enlarge Person, Reduce Person, Force Wave, Electric Claws, Burning Hands, Flash Burst, Water Shock, Acid Arrow. 2nd level, See Invisibility, Gaze, Make Magic Tattoo, Magic Mouth, Enhance Familiar, Rope Trick, Spider Climb, Water Walk, Enduring Flame, Gust of Wind, Darkness, Mirror Image, Shadow Mask, Invisibility Cloak, Web. 3rd level, Arcane Sight, Dispel Magic, Avoid Detection, Locate Creature, Stinking Cloud, Illusory Script, Scribe, Dragon skin, water breathing, fly, grants flight at 60 feet. Stone skin, makes skin as hard as stone. Wall of fire, 2d4 fire damage within 10 feet, 1d4 within 20 feet. 2d6 to those crossing the wall, plus 1 damage per caster level. Wall of ice, creates an ice sheet wall or hemispherical dome. Mad monkey swarm, summons a cluster of mischievous monkeys. Frogs from the sky, summons a cluster of poisonous toads. Swarm of hornets, summons many hornets. Animal cuteness, temporarily transforms a single animal or magical beast into a younger, cuter version of itself. Chapter 52, Level 0 Spells and Staying at School for the Holidays. Studying magic naturally progresses from simple to complex, and because the DD spell system and the magic world still differ in many ways, Ted decided to begin with Level 0 spells. In the Red Robe Wizard's spellbook, Level 0 spells included Mage Hand, Mending Charm, Daze, Flare, Arcane Mark, Prestidigitation, Detect Magic, Read Magic, Message, and Ray of Frost. Some of those had analogs in the magic world. He already had a comparable ability to message through mind power, so that one was unnecessary. Flare resembled a magic world effect called the Permanent Sticking Charm, which could be far stronger. Some skilled wizards could bind two objects together so thoroughly that they seemed to have grown together, and ordinary magic could not separate them. The Level 0 Mending Charm could only fix minor damage, while the higher Mending Charm could restore items shattered into pieces. So on some points, the spells were clearly weaker or redundant compared with what he already knew. Others were more novel. Mage Hand conjured an invisible magical hand, its strength and finesse depending on spell skill and magical power, an extremely useful basic spell. Daze could darken a small area so light would not penetrate. Arcane Mark was essential. Every caster formed a unique arcane mark, like a magical ID. Detect Magic revealed the presence of enchantments on an object or in a place. Read Magic let you decipher mystical texts on books, scrolls, or items without triggering the effects written within. For example, it could let you read a cursed dark arts tome safely. Ray of Frost fired a ray that chilled or froze targets. It seemed like a weaker, less lethal form of an ice arrow, less penetrating but keeping the freeze effect, and it was quick to cast, usually with a simple word or gesture. Ted chose to start with Ray of Frost. He already knew ice magic well. He had learned Frost Armor and Ice Arrow, so Ray of Frost should be straightforward. Cracking it would also establish the spell slot casting model. Once he understood that, other spells would be easier to study. The spell model for Ray of Frost was a simple three-dimensional construct. The main challenge was forming it with raw magic and activating it fast without relying on a magical net. After 2 days of frantic trial and error, he could cast Ray of Frost, but it was hardly practical. The casting took 8 seconds, which made it useless in combat. He focused on simplifying the steps and optimizing the magic flow. 5 days later, he had fully deciphered and localized the spell. Now, with just a finger and a single tonal syllable, an icy-sounding note like ice, he could fire a blue-white beam up to 7 meters, even without a wand, leaving a thin layer of frost on a wooden post. It wasn't devastating, but the point was the process. He had reconstructed a foreign spell system and learned how to operate it. Encouraged, Ted moved on. Arcane Mark and Mage Hand together only took another 4 days. The feeling of steadily understanding and mastering magic was intoxicating. His progress was interrupted when his ghost friend arrived. "Helena, why are you here?" Ted put his wand down as she glided through the wall into the abandoned classroom. The last time he'd seen her had seemed like an ending, 2 weeks ago. He had been so absorbed in study that he'd all but forgotten. Helena glanced at the scattered notes, the open spellbook, and the training dummy, then nodded slightly. "I've gone through some of Mother's things," she said. "I think she did leave something behind in her final years." "A statue?" Ted guessed. "Yes, she must have cast some kind of spell on her statue, a special kind related to thought and soul." Helena watched his reaction closely. She had found clues a week earlier, but delayed coming to him. Ted was bright, earnest, and passionate about magic, and she felt she could trust him. But she was careful. In the past, a similar young man had betrayed her terribly, leaving her with scars. That was why many Ravenclaw students thought the Grey Lady had seemed cold for decades. She had seen ambition and fanaticism before, and did not want to hand that power to someone who would misuse it. To Ted, Ravenclaw's experiments with thought magic were intriguing, but his attention was constantly pulled to new discoveries. He had no single-minded obsession like the boy who had become Lord Voldemort, driven by fear of death into Horcruxes. Helena sighed in relief at his calm interest. "Perhaps," she said, "but I'm afraid, and I miss her." Her feelings were tangled, longing for her mother and the guilt she had carried for 1,000 years, an apology never said. The two of them talked for a long time and agreed to try to solve the mystery of Rowena Ravenclaw's statue, to see what she might have hidden in her last moments. Because the common room was almost always occupied during the day, it would be easier to investigate at night. Ted even practiced the level 0 spell Detect Magic in preparation, though the fact that whatever was in the statue had lasted 1,000 years suggested it was not ordinary magic. It seemed to be something on a different system, more like thought and soul work than the usual link of magic plus will. Helena took out some of Rowena's old notebooks. The 1,000-year-old pages were written in Old English. Ted used read magic to translate them. The notes recorded ideas and inspirations rather than explicit methods, no step-by-step casting instructions, but references to effects and to concepts derived from ancient magic. Rowena had abandoned ordinary spellcraft in favor of probing the soul and the power of thought. Using mind power, Ted could sense only the faintest wisp of intent in the statue. Otherwise, no magical detection revealed anything. The research stalled. Ted was still a first year, with limited experience. It would be surprising if he solved such a deep mystery immediately. Helena, as a ghost, had all the time in the world. She was willing to be patient. By then, it was mid-December. Professor McGonagall and the other heads were circulating parchments to register students staying at school over the holidays. Christmas was a week away. The break would last until early January. Most students and staff were going home. Hermione urged Ted again. "Are you really not coming to my house for Christmas?" Ted thanked her earnestly. "Thank you, Hermione. Maybe another time. This year I'll stay at school." "All right then," she said. It would be quieter for their investigation, and Ted had no intention of giving up the chance to keep learning. 53. Malfoy's itching again. Somehow, Malfoy had gotten wind that Ted and Ron would be staying at Hogwarts over the holidays. Right before potions, the lesson that all 4 houses attended together, he started mouth-running in the corridor. With that smug sneer, he told Goyle, "I really do feel sorry for those people." He pretended to sniffle and wiped his eyes in mock pity. They have to stay here for Christmas because their families don't want them anymore. That arrogant, sarcastic look was exactly the expression of a spoiled child who'd never been taught manners. Ted glanced at him. "Yeah, like our young Master Malfoy, who can go home and cry into his mother's arms, telling tales about how he got a black eye at school. Maybe he'll also whimper about not keeping an appointment and disgrace Slytherin. Perhaps his mother will give him a pacifier to comfort him." "Ha!" Ron, Jerry, and the others burst into exaggerated, thigh-slapping laughter to humiliate Malfoy. He'd come to assert his superiority, but he was painfully sensitive to ridicule. The taunts broke him. He charged at Ron, and another fistfight erupted in the corridor. Outnumbered, Malfoy ended up with a black eye and had to be dragged away by his 2 lackeys. Jerry rubbed his sore foot. Ron touched the swollen lip where he'd been punched, looking as if he'd finally gotten his revenge. Harry stood with his hands on his hips, laughing triumphantly, and Neville was grinning. Only Hermione wore a helpless, exasperated expression, as if to say, "You're all so childish." Even Ted's Ansu looked victorious, squatting on the windowsill and shouting, "Draco, horse dung!" Ted had taught him that. Ron and the others thought the nickname fit perfectly and decided to keep using it. Sometimes Ted forgot that his current body would only be 12 after the new year. Only after this kind of hair-raising group activity did he feel the unbridled joy of youth again. It felt good. It felt especially good to fight. Though he still looked young, Ted had the strength of an adult. He focused his blows on Malfoy's 2 tall, clumsy minions. He straightened his books and laughed. Although his 2 lackeys are big and awkward like 2 hairless gorillas, he shouldn't keep provoking the 5 of us. Is it possible that our young Master Horse Dung is actually an M? What's an M? Ron seized on the phrase, and the others leaned in. Ted hesitated, then began to explain, and a door to a new world creaked open for them. The consequence of the fight was that Malfoy stormed off to Snape to complain. Although Hermione had stayed out of it, Snape still docked 20 points from Ravenclaw, even though only Ted had been involved on that side. And, in an even stranger display of bias, he took 30 points from the Gryffindor quartet over the incident, despite Malfoy's black eye having come from Harry. Everyone saw how blatantly unfair Snape was. As Christmas drew near, Ron and Neville both wrote home. Neville's grandmother, unusually effusive, praised him for choosing wise friends. If you think his character is noble and you share common interests, then don't mind what kind of ears he has, she wrote. Her letter was almost a compliment. The old lady could be strict with Neville, but she clearly saw the benefits of good company. Ron received a warm reply from Molly Weasley, who sympathized and welcomed them to visit her home. It was heartening. The day before Christmas, there were no afternoon classes. Students heading home bustled about packing, particularly the first years, who were eager to return after half a year at school. Ted spotted Hagrid outside the Great Hall, dragging 4 or 5 little pine trees toward the castle. Every Christmas, Hagrid brought in small trees to decorate the hall. Ted waved his wand and used a levitation charm to help Hagrid lift them. Hagrid grinned, balancing a little tree in one hand. "This is a lot easier than a wand," he said, swinging it with a whoosh. Ted and the others ducked reflexively. Hagrid's idea of easier had the force of a troll's club. They were all laughing when Malfoy popped up again, loudly joking to his 2 companions. "I guess some of you are hoping to work for the gamekeeper to earn some pocket money for Christmas," he sneered. That little brat had been loitering near their group lately, looking like a cub who wanted trouble but feared getting thrashed. Hermione and the others bristled, ready to teach him a lesson, but Ted pulled them back. Filch was lurking in a nearby corner, waiting for an excuse to catch them misbehaving. Ted wasn't going to let Malfoy get away with it. He slipped something from his pocket and threw it at Malfoy's head. The Slytherin yelped, clutching his head and looking around for the culprit. "What did you hit him with?" Hermione asked, curious. Ted held out his hand. It was a rock cake. Harry looked surprised. "You still had that?" Ted smiled. "I knew it would come in handy eventually." It was a cold, slightly misty morning when they saw Hermione and Harry off at the front entrance. First years still arrived by boat, but after that, students used the main gate and took thestral-drawn carriages. Most people couldn't see thestrals, skeletal, strange-looking horses, but Ted could. They weren't beautiful, but they were docile and efficient. Ted found himself wondering whether he'd seen any deaths in his previous life. The thestrals made him think of that strange, distant memory. They waved as the carriage disappeared down the road toward Hogsmeade Station, where it would meet the train. The day before, 2 ministry employees had come to Hogwarts with a stack of parchment for the new students to sign. There was an odd magical sensation about the forms. They weren't just legal terms. The document, titled Regulations on the Use of Magic by Underage Wizards Outside of School, felt more like a contract. After the students signed, a faint magical wisp wrapped around each wand and vanished. Ted later asked Professor McGonagall. She confirmed it was a contract charm tied to the trace. After signing, the ministry could detect when magic was used nearby and investigate. The effect lasted until a wizard turned 17, though there were obvious loopholes. In bustling wizarding areas, it was impossible to tell who had cast a spell, so established wizarding families or places like Diagon Alley were effectively unrestricted. The system existed mainly to control underage magic among children from Muggle families. With the holidays on, most students relaxed and many professors left. Ron and Jerry, notoriously lazy, skipped their morning runs without Neville's nagging. "We've studied for half a year. Can't we enjoy ourselves?" They grumbled. "Don't even mention the library. If someone says the word, I'm going to be furious. The library doesn't belong to Christmas." So Ted kept going to the library by himself. He wanted to learn more spells and, more importantly, to research the thought magic he believed Ravenclaw had left behind. Hogwarts had the largest magical library in Britain, over 100,000 books, 2 vast levels of shelves that reached the ceiling, and even a restricted section. Still, Ted couldn't find anything useful. Perhaps the kind of thought magic he was looking for had been Ravenclaw's private study and never rediscovered. The four founders had been unparalleled powers in the magical world, and much of what they'd studied was beyond later generations. Over the centuries, knowledge had been lost as much as it had advanced. Ancient magic became a rare subject, and ancient runes an unpopular elective. In a small, conservative society, the loss of arcane techniques was nearly inevitable. One afternoon in the library, two girls sat down across from Ted. They weren't the Weasley twins. Fred and George seldom came to the library unless they had to. These were another pair of twins, Parvati and Padma Patil. Parvati, in Gryffindor, was Harry's roommate. Padma, in Ravenclaw, was Hermione's. Both had thick black hair and striking features, fairer skin than what some expected from India, the kind of light skin often associated with higher castes. In the books, they were considered attractive students in their respective houses. "Hi, Ted," Padma said, and Parvati nodded. Ted still had a decent reputation among the first years. Beyond his point earning in various classes, his habit of provoking Snape and then giving away the points he'd won made him memorable. His very loud, intentionally awful rendition of the school song during the sorting ceremony had guaranteed that most new students remembered him, and the Halloween incident that had terrified many still lingered in people's memories. "Are you staying at school over the holidays too?" Ted asked softly. Madame Pince was out of earshot. The Patil twins' family business called them back to India sometimes, and this year they were remaining at Hogwarts for the break. The three of them fell into easy conversation. Ted even asked about news from the Indian magical world, trying to pick up any scrap of information about ancient magics. Thanks to readers Worried City and Empty Surprise for the 1,500 reward. Thank you both. 54. Ravenclaw Magic. There are 11 magic schools universally recognized across the magical world. The three in Europe used to interact regularly, Triwizard Tournament and all, so they maintained frequent contact. Russia has its own academy, Koldovstorets. Speaking of which, with the Russian bear splitting into Great Russia and Little Russia, the magic community there is bound to be thrown into chaos. The magical and non-magical worlds pretend to be separate, but they really aren't. There are only a few 100,000 witches and wizards scattered around the globe. That's not enough to form a completely self-contained society. In Britain, for example, few wizards are involved in production. The Ministry of Magic imports food and raw materials from Muggles through exclusive channels and even liaises with the Muggle Prime Minister. The United States has Ilvermorny, which was the main setting in Fantastic Beasts. Rumor even says Slytherin's wand turned into a great tree there. Japan has its own institute. Ted imagines something like an Onmyo-ryo, teaching onmyoji and mages. Maybe shrine maidens train there. Africa's sole school is Ouagadougou, the largest by enrollment, simply because it's the only wizarding academy on the whole continent, unless we're talking about Wakanda. Brazil's Castelo Bruxo sits in the rainforest and specializes in herbology and magizoology. The other three schools interact little with the rest of the world. They're probably reclusive institutions, the sort that hide in high mountains like Kamartaj used to be in legend. Ancient regions like China and India certainly have mysterious organizations that teach what we'd call magic by other names. Ted imagines China split into many sects and India into many factions. Some legendary, like those Shaktism groups that preach that power grows with numbers and the stranger the ritual, the better. They work with monitor lizards and crocodiles. Ted won't go into details, you'd better experience it yourself. Eastern traditions often rely on apprenticeship systems. In Europe, that model has mostly vanished. How can an individual teacher rival an entire school? One-on-one training is possible, but extremely specialized. From talking with the twins, Ted picked up a lot about Indian magical concepts, especially the connections among will, magic, and faith. Eastern magic systems are almost completely different from European ones, especially regarding faith. Indian belief is a chaotic blend. They admit gods didn't exist at first. When enough people believe, gods are born. Gods can be man-made. In such systems, priests or mages can really summon divine power. It's confusing. If I start believing in the flying spaghetti monster, will a great flying spaghetti monster come into being. That's akin to chaos magic, where you can seek help from gods like Doraemon or Ultraman Tiga. The idea of creating gods through belief closely parallels certain Indian practices. Ted's foundation in these matters is still shallow. He's run into too many basic questions that easily overwhelm him. But even setting faith aside, the question of where magic comes from is a perennial puzzle. In the library, Ted found 3 or 4 major hypotheses. Some believe magic is inherited through bloodlines. Most wizards' children are wizards, and Squib's descendants can still produce wizards generations later. But who did the first wizard inherit from? Some propose humanoid magical creatures passed power down. It's an ugly idea to some wizards, but possible. Others say magic springs from will, that it's born of intent. Others claim it originates in the soul, that a wizard's soul differs from a muggle's. Still others attribute it to nature, a beneficial mutation. And there are astrologers who insist stars are the source, celestial influence giving rise to magic. From those theories come debates about spells. Were spells invented or discovered? Ted leans toward invention. Early wizards, little wizards during magic outbursts, could perform feats without incantations or wands. The first spells were likely produced to achieve complex effects more reliably and to make learning easier. Spells, Ted thinks, are a form of self-suggestion, a ritualized sequence of words and movements that convinces the caster's mind and magic that a particular result must follow. In a way, they're a suggestion the wizard's own power obeys. That line of thought reminded him of something Helena once said. In her final years, their mother had set aside rune casting and many kinds of ancient magic and turned instead to researching unusual types of magic. Rune casting still exists, but it's rare. It demands a profound understanding of ancient runes. Alchemists study them because alchemy needs runes, but the subject has few students. Ancient magic is rarer still. By its nature, ancient means most of it has been lost. Its principles and methods differ dramatically from modern magic, and its power can be terrifying. For that reason, much of it wasn't kept in common practice, too dangerous or destabilizing. Hogwarts doesn't even teach dark arts anymore. The Ministry forbids powerful magic to anyone outside a few aurors because maintaining control is in their interest. Think of gun control in the Muggle world and the deaths guns cause. Powerful tools tend to destabilize societies. In Ravenclaw's time, around the 10th century, ancient magic wouldn't have been entirely lost. The founders must have encountered some of it. So what could Ravenclaw have discovered that made her abandon such research? Ted said goodbye to the twins and went back to his dormitory with that question nagging him. Since becoming a mind mage and mastering mind power, he hadn't felt this sort of anxious, gnawing frustration. He calmed himself and began to meditate, refusing to let negative emotions disturb him. It was the Christmas holiday. His roommates had all gone home, leaving only Ted and Ansu. The castle was unusually quiet. He let his spirit spread outward, quickly reaching the Ravenclaw common room. There was the statue again, and inside it a faint wisp of thought. Mind power can perceive thoughts, a student's pet, a wandering ghost, even portraits and their stored impressions. The sensations differ. Pets think simply but vibrantly, lively, agile, like a bright watercolor. Ghosts are similar, but more ethereal and diffuse. They have trouble concentrating and often drift for days. Their impressions are a detailed sketch, but blurry. Portraits are different. They capture outlines and mannerisms, but only in a two-dimensional, simplified way, stick figures compared to living minds. The thought inside the Ravenclaw statue was stranger, like a balled-up 3D image. Compressed, folded, dense. That sight tugged at something in him. Ravenclaw's last research must have reached something profound, but time wasn't on her side. She had fallen gravely ill and never even saw her daughter again. Perhaps her sickness was caused by whatever she'd been probing. Wizards throughout history have died chasing unknown magic. If this thought was a folded three-dimensional memory or pattern, what would happen if he could unfold it and restore it? The insight settled in like a spark. Ted opened his mind and settled deeper into meditation, letting the castle's quiet and his mind power focus on that compact, balled-up thing in the statue. If he could restore it to its original state, maybe he could read what Ravenclaw had found. The new term was almost over. He wondered if he could squeeze into the top 10. 55. Missing Ravenclaw. Dumbledore panicked. Helena, think carefully. Think about your time with Ravenclaw. Did she ever say anything that could be related to this? Ted asked. Helena's eyes went distant and unfocused as she sank into deep thought. For a ghost with little sense of time, that contemplation stretched on for hours. When Ted returned after dinner, she was still hovering in the same place, lost in memory. By midnight, he could not stay awake any longer and decided to continue in the morning. He was just about to tell her to rest and take her time when she interrupted him. I think I remember. Mother, she said something like this. Her expression was anxious and full of sorrow. She floated over to the statue and called softly, Mom? Mom, I'm back. Please open the door for me. It's Helena. Ted felt a sudden magical fluctuation from the statue. He cast a quick detection charm and saw a blue light growing brighter on the statue. The Ravenclaw statue blinked and spoke in a gentle, clear voice, an elegant woman whose words carried calm wisdom. Helena, my daughter, is that you? Pearlescent tears ran down Helena's face as she reached out to embrace her mother, but her hands passed through stone. She had been a ghost for nearly 1,000 years. Mom, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, she sobbed. Don't cry, Helena. Don't cry, my poor child, the statue replied. I was already very ill then. I feared I wouldn't see you again, and I feared you would be unable to move on. It was my fault. I should never have sent Barrow to fetch you. His mind was already twisted by the dark arts by that time. No, don't blame yourself, Mom. Don't blame me, Helena pleaded. No, it's my fault. If I hadn't stolen the diadem and distracted you, you wouldn't have died. Mother, please forgive me. The statue reached out as far as it could, and the two shared a phantom embrace, one impossible to feel, the other impossible to enact. For a long while, mother and daughter exchanged apologies, the kind that had been overdue for a millennium. Ravenclaw comforted Helena until, slowly, they both calmed. When I heard the terrible news, I was too weak to hold on, the statue admitted. But I worried about you, Helena. I feared you would fear death and be unable to pass on. Now I see my fears were justified. At the time, I could only perform an incomplete enchantment on this statue. It prevented me from awakening on my own. Fortunately, I left enough magic hidden elsewhere. Helena, do not fear. Follow me. A fist-sized ball of light floated out from the statue and hovered ahead. Helena followed while the light led them out of the tower. Before long, she looked back at Ted and waved. Ted, thank you. Please come with us. I may need to continue my journey, and I hope you can be my final witness. Ted bowed silently and followed. With the ball of light leading, the castle itself seemed to come alive. Portraits that usually chatted and moved remained still in their frames. Suits of armor stepped forward and saluted, and the moving staircases shifted to form a clear path. The castle rearranged itself around them like a transforming mechanism. Soon they left Ravenclaw Tower, crossed the Sky Bridge, and entered the main tower. On the 8th floor corridor, the light stopped in front of a tapestry, the familiar Barnabas the Barmy and the Troll, which told the story of a wizard who tried to teach a troll ballet and was promptly clubbed for his trouble. A door appeared on the wall opposite the tapestry, a 3-meter-high double oak door edged in gold, set with a raven motif. The great doors opened and the light drifted inside. Ravenclaw's voice said, "Please come in, Helena and the young one. This was my study." Ted did not expect Ravenclaw to lead them to the Room of Requirement. He had heard of it, but had never tried to use it in his first year. He watched as Ravenclaw guided them into what she called her Chamber of Secrets. It was not a cluttered lab of the kind he had imagined. There was a large, curved table, a few chairs, an antique sofa, and a bookcase. The opposite wall, however, was etched with countless faint blue lines that converged into an intricate geometric pattern. The ball of light flew into the wall, and the lines suddenly linked, flowing outward and along the room's hidden magical currents. Far away, Dumbledore, who had been asleep, shot awake. He ripped off his pointed nightcap, snatched his half-moon spectacles from the bedside table, and peered about the room. He reached out as though to touch something and found no response. Snatching up his robe without bothering to change out of his star-patterned pajamas, he hurried down to the headmaster's office. The portraits of former headmasters were dozing, their features slack. For a moment, his authority as headmaster over the castle's magic seemed to vanish. He was ready to act. Then, almost instantly, the authority returned. From the moment he woke to the moment he confirmed and then regained that authority, less than a minute had passed. "What happened?" he murmured to himself. Back in Ravenclaw's chamber, the blue energies coalesced into the image of a middle-aged woman in blue robes. Ravenclaw. She reached out and gently took Helena's hand. She touched the ghost. Ted and Helena were both astonished. "No need to be too surprised," she chuckled. "Ordinary means cannot touch ghosts, but certain high-level magic can. I borrowed the headmaster's authority for a short time to mobilize the castle's enchantments and give this fragment of myself a temporary, touch-capable form." Ted felt as if she were speaking another language, touching ghosts, high-level magic, borrowing the headmaster's authority, creating a body. "So you're... I am not resurrected, nor am I Rowena Ravenclaw herself," she said. "I am a fragment of thought infused with her feelings. No one can truly live for 1,000 years, and resurrection after a millennium is impossible." She held her daughter and looked at her gently. "Time is short, Helena. Are you ready?" Helena looked up and nodded. "Mother, I'm not afraid anymore." She turned to Ted. "Thank you, Ted." Ted bowed, saluted with a quiet, "May your journey be peaceful." Ravenclaw smiled. "Thank you, young one. I hope what I leave will help you." A book appeared on the curved table and opened by itself. Its pages were filled with dense text and diagrams. A soft, white light, comforting but not blinding, enveloped mother and daughter. Helena waved at Ted. "Goodbye, Ted." "Goodbye, Helena." "Goodbye, Ravenclaw," he replied. When the light faded, they were gone. The chamber itself remained, but the blue lines on the wall had subsided. Ted moved through the room, glanced at the bookcase, and opened the book Ravenclaw had left behind. It was thick, decisive, bronze-edged, the sort of heavy tome that could seriously injure someone if it fell on their head. He looked toward where Helena had disappeared and felt a mix of emotions, relief, sorrow, and a strange emptiness at how suddenly one of his friends had been taken from his life. A system notification chimed in his head. Ding! Hidden quest completed. Ravenclaw's Chamber of Secrets. Reward, 3,000 experience. Random card. Purple quest? 3,000 experience and a random card? Ted muttered in surprise. He stared again at the spot where mother and daughter had vanished and decided to leave the chamber untouched for the moment. Based on Ravenclaw's last actions, he now had some authority over this Chamber of Secrets. He would return later when he had time to think. For now, he would go back and sort out his feelings. Ted pushed open the door and had only walked a few steps down the corridor when he almost ran into Dumbledore, still in his pajamas and nightcap, his eyes behind the half-moon glasses bright with concern. "Mr. Epiphany, has something happened?" he asked. Chapter 56, Responsiveness and the Ravenclaw Chamber of Secrets and Eggs. "Oh, Professor!" Ted hadn't expected to run into anyone the moment he stepped out. He hadn't anticipated it at all. He remembered Ravenclaw saying in the Chamber of Secrets that she had temporarily borrowed the principal's authority. Wouldn't that alarm the principal? Ravenclaw had left in such a hurry and left a big hole to fill. Ted's mind raced. He decided to confess, but only with limits. "Good evening, Professor. I hope you're not here to catch me out after hours," Ted said. Dumbledore smiled and pushed his half-moon spectacles up. "That depends on your explanation. Although the punishment for being out after hours during the holidays isn't severe, I'm just teasing." Ted put on a mock expression of being startled. The story begins several months ago. Since he'd decided to confess, Ted went all in. He could have started with a mythic origin, Pangu creating the world and a shard of the Great Tao, landing in ancient Celtic lands only to be picked up by a young Merlin, but he stuck to the essentials. Through music and Helena, the Grey Lady, I became friends with her. During a pre-sleep meditation, my spirit expanded and slipped from my body. I discovered something odd in Ravenclaw's statue in our common room. Tonight, we finally evoked the thoughts Ravenclaw left in that statue. She led us here and said this was a research lab she set up when she first built the school. That's what she said. Dumbledore's eyebrows rose. Yes, Helena finally found the courage to move on. Ravenclaw left the lab to me. Ted finished with a bold little flourish, as if to underline the point. Dumbledore's eyes lit up. Astonishing. It's been many years since anything surprised this old man. Today was a genuine shock. Epiphany, you've done very well, Dumbledore went on. I didn't expect you to help Helena overcome her fear and move on. It's also fitting for Ravenclaw's legacy to be entrusted to a Ravenclaw student. That settled the core issue. Ravenclaw's research would be left as she'd intended, and Dumbledore's approval soothed Ted more than he expected. For Dumbledore, many things no longer held the same attraction. The main thing on his mind had always been his wayward pupil, Tom. But once he understood the story, he relaxed. If a founder's authority overran the principles, so be it. Ted invited Dumbledore to see the lab. The headmaster was eager. Who wouldn't want to see a 1,000-year-old magical research chamber? But Ravenclaw's permission had been explicit and narrow. Only Ted could enter. Ted opened the room of requirement and stepped inside, while Dumbledore, who followed, passed through a different doorway into an empty, abandoned classroom. After 2 attempts, the old man chuckled and gave up. It seems only you can go there, Dumbledore said. Epiphany, use this legacy well. It's late. This old man must get some sleep. Good night. Back in the dormitory, Ted lay awake for a long time. He resisted using mind power to quiet himself. Helena's transcendence, Ravenclaw's trust, Dumbledore's reaction, too many thoughts swirled. Mind power could blunt emotions, but sometimes he wanted to savor them. Ah, I almost forgot. The card draw, he smacked his forehead. Fortunately, the dormitory was quiet. Only Ansu was briefly disturbed by the noise. Ted hurried to the washroom to splash water on his face. This was a purple tier draw. He had to treat it seriously. System, claim reward. 3 purple-bordered cards appeared in his mind, pleasingly rendered. The first showed a sleek, silver-gray cloak with feather-like edging on the hood and an attached mask that revealed only the wearer's eyes. Shadow of Menzoberranzan, purple. Item card. This Underdark Drow cloak grants use of Greater Invisibility Cloak once per activation and provides shadow concealment and divination interference. Duration, 30 minutes. Cooldown, 3 hours. Greater Invisibility Cloak renders the wearer undetectable by normal means. Attacking will not reveal you. Shadow Concealment turns you into a mass of darkness if you stand still in shadow. Divination Interference prevents divination and prophecy from reliably detecting your past traces or future possibilities, blocking attempts to plot or track you. The second card depicted an Eastern-style Oni with a ghostly claw threaded with prayer beads reaching toward a tiny person. Sealing Jutsu, Reaper Death Seal, purple. Spell card seals your soul and the enemy's soul into the belly of the death god. Uses 1/1. Note, ignores the enemy's physical strength. Effectiveness depends on soul strength. The third card depicted a reddish-brown, spotted giant egg ringed with sharp spikes. Ria's Last Egg, purple item card. Can hatch an Azeroth red dragon whelp. Note, hatching requires extensive steps and rare magical materials. The cloak was essentially an otherworldly, advanced invisibility item, tempting. The Reaper Death Seal, however, was a no-go. It was mutually destructive and far too risky. The Dragon Egg, an Azeroth dragon. The benefits would be enormous, even if hatching was difficult. If it couldn't be hatched, at the very least it would be top-tier potion material. You're the one, he thought, knowing the system would list the materials needed. He opened the requirements and, reading long arcane names that implied layers of difficulty, let out a groan. Geneva refund, he cried into the empty washroom. The following day, Ted slipped back into the room of requirement to examine Ravenclaw's Chamber of Secrets properly. Shelves held arcane tomes, notebooks full of research, and even Ravenclaw's diary. Reading through, Ted glimpsed her research direction and began methodically to map wizarding levels to his own system. He used appraisal a lot during this period, on classmates, on professors, taking care to do it in public, bustling scenes where it wouldn't feel invasive. The technique let him gather data without causing offense, and the results clarified what the system's levels meant in the Hogwarts world. Professional levels, he found, generally corresponded like this. 5th-year students usually ranged from 3rd to 5th level wizards, depending on talent and effort. A student like Hermione would likely be a 5th level wizard in her 5th year, perhaps even pushing 6th. 7th-year students approaching graduation clustered around 5th to 8th level. A 5th level wizard was fairly average, Students who excelled in 7 or 8 subjects might reach 8th level. There were exceptions, out-of-bounds existences like Lord Voldemort, who opened the Chamber of Secrets and created a Horcrux while still a 5th year, were in a league of their own. Professors typically ranged from 11th to 15th level, though some were specialized teachers and didn't fit the scale cleanly. Trelawney and Madame Hooch, for example, weren't measured by conventional combat-oriented metrics. McGonagall and Flitwick both checked in around 15th level, Snape reached 17th, and Dumbledore sat at roughly 20th level, marked by the system as legendary. Ted suspected Ravenclaw's essays hinted at that same threshold. She seemed to suggest the other founders had crossed it. Once a wizard passed the legendary level, they could pursue their own magic path, forming a unique magical domain tied to their identity. That kind of realization, Ravenclaw implied, was a hallmark of truly transcendent practitioners, an insight Ted filed away, both curious and eager to explore. 57. Social Death Party. After talking about levels, let's talk about attributes. The average for a normal adult is 5 points. Lower year students usually only have 3 to 4 points in stamina and agility. Their intelligence generally ranges between 4 and 6. Someone like Hermione is naturally brilliant. She has a full 7 points. Keep in mind she's only 12. She'll still grow. Now, skill levels. The level required to get an outstanding on the 5th year OWLs is Level 3. The level required to get an outstanding on the 7th year NEWTs is Level 4. Level 8 is called a Master. For example, Professor Flitwick's Charms or Snape's Potions and Dark Arts. Anything above that, Level 9, is probably the peak for an ordinary wizard. But if you want to be a legend, there's Level 9 Plus, a realm beyond. Probably only Dumbledore's Transfiguration and Lord Voldemort's Dark Arts reach that level. Ted even suspects Nicholas Flamel's alchemy is only Level 9. Below skills are magic. The level of a wizard's magic depends on their personal mastery. In general, similar spells will be limited by skill levels, but some can break through those limits. Take Lockhart, for example. His memory charm was undoubtedly Level 8, so powerful that so many excellent wizards had their memories stolen without noticing. But he sacrificed everything else. His other charms degraded completely, leaving him useless. Maybe he specialized in memory charms so much that his other magic atrophied. Ted was now sure the founders must have surpassed LV20, which is why they came together to found this 1,000-year-old magic school. And once they entered that legendary realm, the magic they pursued wasn't ordinary spells like this or that, but a more essential and profound path. Exactly what that path was, Ted didn't know. Ravenclaw had 3 main research directions. The first was ancient runes. Hogwarts was founded around 990 AD, and by then Ravenclaw had already reached the legendary level. But before reaching legend, her main studies were ancient runes and wish magic. At that time, ancient runes were still relatively common magical scripts. It's like after the first emperor of Qin unified the states and standardized writing, he introduced the small seal script, but the large seal script was still in circulation. Though the small seal script became mainstream, scholars still knew the large seal script. Ancient runes were the large seal script of their age. Nowadays, anyone who can read small seal script is an expert. Even fewer know the large seal script. It's like the current magical world. Studying ancient runes is more like looking at pictures and telling stories. Few can use them to cast spells. After years of study, most people only glean a simplified lumos, so no one wants to study them anymore. But Ravenclaw studied ancient runes and left behind a whole set of materials and research notes. For Ted, those were treasures. He had photocopied her entire set of textbooks and even got a system notification, plus LV1 ancient runes. It counted as a direct introduction to ancient runes. And after delving deeply into ancient runes and touching their essential mysteries, Ravenclaw, by then roughly the level of a master, encountered wish magic during her research. More precisely, it was prayer magic. If you speak of essence, all magic cast by wizards is wish-based, but various restrictions prevent wizards from shaping magic purely as they desire. When Ravenclaw studied some BC texts, she discovered that the earliest wizards had no charms, no wands, not even formal spells. They cast without so many rituals. Their magical power simply accomplished what they wanted. Many fairy tale protagonists pray, "Come quickly, spring," or "bloom flowers," and wishes come true. It was probably a similar ability. But because of subconscious effects, there were limits. Spells wore off at midnight, people reverted to their dusty forms, and so on. It was through studying wish magic that Ravenclaw stepped into the legendary realm. In fact, the core mechanism of Hogwarts Castle is wish magic. It is the shared subconscious wish of countless wizards who studied there. The Room of Requirement was built by Ravenclaw to gather magical will and respond to the needs of students and staff. It can realize many of the castle's functions, which is why the Room of Requirement can provide whatever someone requires. It connects to all parts of the castle. It is the second core of the castle. The first is the headmaster's office. The Room of Requirement handles applications, acting like the castle's software, while the headmaster's office holds permissions, acting like the backend. The research Ravenclaw pursued in her last years probed the soul. That was why she was gravely injured and ultimately died. In her diary, she wrote about her work like this: "How are human thoughts born? Where are they born? Can they be stripped away and exist independently? And where do humans come from?" On thought research, Ravenclaw already had findings. In her final moments, she stripped away her longing for her daughter and left it behind. That's how some past events occurred. And regarding where do humans come from, Ravenclaw had dug deep. Ted even found terrifying clues in her diary. Helena, Ravenclaw's daughter, might not have a father. She could be a life created by Ravenclaw within her own body. That was a dual application of prayer magic and soul magic, a spell that creates life. The notion chilled Ted to the bone. That sort of research had to be taboo. Ravenclaw was naturally wise, and even among the founders, she was famed for her intellect. But genius trapped in an obsession is frightening. Countless mad scientists were born that way. It took Ted a long time to set aside those tangled thoughts. For now, ancient runes were the only suitable focus for him, at least for the next year or two, so it was better not to dwell on it. "Ted, what's wrong? You seem absent-minded these past 2 days," Jerry and Ron asked, concerned. Ted pulled his thoughts back and decided to push Ravenclaw's legacy to the side for the moment and live in the present. "Nothing, just a bit sleep-deprived lately. By the way, the day after tomorrow is Christmas. I've got presents for you," Ted said with a smile. "Don't worry, you won't be left out." Ron thumped Ted's shoulder. He hoped Ted would like the big box of milk toffee his mum had made. A broke teen can't afford to be left out. Even though Ravenclaw had occupied his mind most of the past 2 days, Ted had still prepared gifts for his friends. Ansu had flown back and forth so many times she was nearly exhausted. Christmas arrived. Ted woke up, looked out the window. No snow. Although the Scottish Highlands were pretty far north compared to his hometown in the northeast back in his previous life, it wasn't cold enough. It wasn't unusual for there to be no snow on Christmas, but it did sap some of the atmosphere. Just as Ted was about to get out of bed to check if he'd received any gifts, a system notification popped up. Ding! Holiday quest triggered. Death-defying feast. As your first Christmas at Hogwarts, are you really going to spend it so plainly? You can't, right? You can't, right? You can't, right? Let's get it on. Objective: put on a Santa hat and a fake beard, carry a big sack, visit the 4 common rooms, and show off their Christmas snacks. Reward: 250 EXP, chasing Snowball Green. Some people are alive but already socially dead. You're doing this again? Wasn't Halloween enough? The students are going to get PTSD from you. Pretending to be Santa and freeloading off people's food. How is that a death-defying feast? That's a socially dead feast. And 250 EXP? Are you kidding me? Just say yes or no. Are you going? Where did you put the Santa hat and beard? Chapter 58. Live well. Happy funeral. Ted had been assigned a socially mortifying task, and he hadn't expected to have to prepare the costume himself. It was outrageous. Not even the most exploitative capitalist could be this bad. He was about to get up to find his Santa suit when he noticed a pile of gift boxes of every size scattered on the floor beside his bed. The system had distracted him. He'd almost forgotten about Christmas presents. He picked one up at random. It was from Ron's mother, Molly Weasley. Ron had written home about Ted and Jerry, and Molly had invited the two little wizards to visit anytime. Ted hadn't expected she would have sent gifts too. Inside was a white striped sweater with a large T embroidered on the chest. He tried it on. It fit perfectly and was very warm. He made a mental note to thank Molly. Later, he learned Molly had given Jerry a matching sweater, yellow striped with a J. Harry and Neville. She had sent a big box of homemade fudge. According to Harry, it tasted quite wonderful. Coincidentally, Ron's gift to Ted had also been his mother's fudge. Hermione hadn't received anything from Molly, but Ted had given Ron a huge box of Muggle sweets, over 20 different kinds, from gummy bears to hard fruit drops, all new to him. He'd also given George and Fred a Muggle joke book, counted as one gift between twins. Ted opened present after present until his bed was covered. Among the gifts, Neville had given him a family heirloom, a book called Legends of 16th Century Wizards, recording the stories of a dozen or so famous wizards. Ted's return gift to Neville was a handwritten book he'd made himself, Braveheart. Its protagonist was a blacksmith named Wallace, whose wife was persecuted and killed by a cruel lord. Driven by grief, Wallace rose up against tyranny and died a hero. Ted had written on the flyleaf, "When you have something to protect, you become brave." Unbeknownst to him, Neville had cried when he read it. His grandmother Augusta saw the inscription and said, "If I have the chance, I want to thank this child in person." Hermione's gift to Ted was a self-inking pen, enchanted to write on its own. Ted smiled as he turned the sapphire blue pen over. No wonder Hermione had looked so thoughtful before the holidays. She'd been experimenting with enchantments. They had all recently signed the Ministry's decree for the reasonable restriction of underage sorcery. After that, underage wands were tracked and any spell cast nearby would be detected. Ron later tried to comfort Ted when he heard about the pen. "Don't be sad, Ted. Hermione didn't do it on purpose." In Ron's mind, the gift had seemed awful. Hermione bristled at the suggestion. "Don't be ridiculous. That pen is very useful, and Ted doesn't like sweets." In fact, most of Hermione's gifts to others had been sweets. Chocolate frogs for Harry, licorice wands for Ron, chocolate cauldron cakes for Neville, and super bubblegum for Jerry. Ted's gift to Hermione was a small notebook of the spells he'd come up with, arcane wisdom. What could suit Hermione better than something that might increase her knowledge? Harry had received a copy of the Book of Spells, reportedly a House of Black heirloom once cherished by his godfather Sirius. Handy, people joked, for learning how to deal with Snape. Ted had given Harry a little clock, a brass wind-up alarm he'd bought for £3, and enchanted so that when it rang, it would run around and dodge whatever tried to silence it. Ted had heard Harry always overslept. Jerry had given Ted a thick cloak his mother had sewn. Ted had gifted Jerry a head-sized box of Italian cheese. Ted had also received a copy of Potions Tips from Professor Slughorn and a collection of wizard adventure stories from Old Tom at the Leaky Cauldron. That people he had spent time with remembered him and sent gifts made Ted feel unexpectedly successful. He'd given Slughorn a bottle of his homemade pimple potion and a thank you letter for 2 months of lessons that had saved him from Snape's worst torment. To Old Tom, he'd sent a small bottle of strong fire whiskey and a blue quill for Old Tom's granddaughter Hannah. Professor McGonagall's gifts surprised him, a brand new wizarding robe and a book called Quidditch Technical Analysis. Ted suspected she was encouraging his flying, though he knew better than to think Gryffindor would triumph without the chosen one. He was grateful for her rescuing him from the orphanage and, because he had twice been able to call on her help to complete tasks, had bought her an off-white wool scarf. He joked about giving her a cardboard box, but he didn't dare risk being turned into an animal and left in the Forbidden Forest. He'd also brought a silver chain monocle for the dean from a Muggle flea market, and even prepared a gift for Snape, though he wasn't sure what the professor would think of it. Through Ansu, he had remitted £50 to the orphanage, which seriously dented his pocket money. Couldn't Ravenclaw's legacy have left a few dog-head gold nuggets? He grumbled to himself. By 9 o'clock, Ted went to find his Christmas suit. If you needed anything at Hogwarts, the house elves were the ones to ask. He went down to the kitchens. "Excuse me, could someone help me find a few things?" As soon as he entered, 5 or 6 house elves looked up. Before he'd finished the question, 7 or 8 more had swarmed him. Me! 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 They chorused. Choose me, Mr. Epiphany. I can find anything for Mr. Epiphany. I'll find twice as much as you. Ted hadn't expected to be so popular. Don't worry, it's nothing strange. I want to dress as Santa Claus to bring some Christmas cheer to the castle. I need clothes, a hat, and a beard. After all, it's Christmas. He slapped his forehead. Oh, almost forgot. These are for you. He handed out packets of Muggle sweets. Different flavors. Please try them. At the mention of Muggle candies, the house elves' big eyes filled with tears. Oh, don't cry. Try them first, please. Ted begged. The kitchen soon rang with laughter, and the house elves happily sampled the sweets while helping him assemble a costume. It wasn't perfect, but with a little transfiguration and a lot of goodwill, Ted was ready before the midday Christmas feast. Under the largest tree in the Great Hall, students who had stayed at school spotted an old man. A red hat with a white brim, a big white beard, a red cotton coat trimmed in white, and a shiny black raven perched on his shoulder. The Muggle-raised children, having heard of Santa Claus, shouted out with delight, Santa! Santa Claus, of course, was a modern folk concept, hardly known in the magical world. Most of them didn't even know who Jesus was, so the sight seemed novel and magical. Ron and Jerry, however, recognized him. Ansu had already let the secret slip. They exchanged a look. Ron whispered, What is Ted going to do? Jerry smiled, I don't know. Ted picked up his guitar and began to play. He started with a Christmas song to set the mood. Jingle bells, jingle all the way, almost slipping into the jaunty tune of a Muggle jingle. The students applauded thunderously. Then Ted, drawing on his street performing skills, launched into something livelier, the energetic rabbit dance. 59. Do you think I still have a chance? The rabbit dance ought to be called Penguin's Game in English. That disco tune had somehow become inexplicably popular back in the Celestial Empire, and plenty of people had danced to it during their student days. It probably hadn't been officially released here, but that didn't matter to Ted. What's mine is mine. Left, right, go, turn around, go, go, go. He had transfigured a music box to reproduce the accompaniment. Now he played, danced, and sang, with Ansu as a backup dancer. The whole scene was ridiculous and irresistible. The Hogwarts Great Hall turned into a concert venue in an instant. The music felt enchanted. Before the chorus had even finished, students' hands and feet were moving of their own accord, already dancing. The crowd roared, Ted, Ted, Ted. Ted waved a hand. Sit down, everyone. Basic etiquette. Then he smiled, drew out a card labeled Mysterious Dance Flute, and began to play. He'd had the flute for a long time. Now was its moment. He accompanied the rabbit dance music box. My friends, let's get a little high together, shall we? The flute's magic made everyone nearby start dancing along involuntarily. Some realized what was happening and tried to stop, but the moment they relaxed their concentration, their bodies began moving again. What is this magic? My feet, why won't they listen? My hands, stop! This is so embarrassing. But shame evaporated when everyone around was dancing. Instead came a strange exhilaration. If the whole room was socially dead, no one was. Dancing in public suddenly seemed perfectly fine. The shared spectacle erased the embarrassment. With a song like that, like-minded spirits appeared everywhere. After Ted announced he could perform in each common room, invitations poured in. Even a few Slytherins staying in the castle awkwardly welcomed him to try their snacks. The Weasley siblings who remained at Hogwarts were stunned. Ted was being welcomed across houses. Peggy Weasley patted her brother's shoulders. Your friend is amazing. Nobody had expected this level of showmanship. George glanced at Fred, the sort of friend we want to recruit. Ron muttered that Hermione had said Ted was good at piano and singing. He'd thought she was joking. Jerry begged to be included next time Ted showed off. The professors at dinner were baffled. Did Dumbledore invite a performing group for Christmas? One wondered. Dumbledore sighed and said he didn't know. After dinner, Ted spent less than 2 hours running through the 4 common rooms, part performance, part freeloading on food and drink. He sang Do Re Mi, Spanish Bullfight, Jasmine Flower, and other classics. As he left, a system-like chime chimed. Ding quest completed. Sworn to the feast. Reward 250 experience points. Card. He departed amid applause, brushing off his clothes as if it had all been nothing. Ron and Jerry, who had followed for free food, watched the red-cloaked figure leave, stunned. Ted, the Christmas performer, had arrived amid astonishment and gone in a blaze of applause. After that night, everyone at school knew Ted could sing and dance. His rabbit dance was all the rage. Item card. After use, transforms into an automatically flying snowball that chases targets. Chase duration, 3 minutes. Cooldown, 10 minutes. Christmas dinner itself was indulgent, the tables overflowing with food, but there were no standout performances. Everyone agreed the professional acts were mediocre compared to Ted's impromptu show. The next morning, Ted arrived early for breakfast after his morning exercise. Students trickled in and gave him the same amused, conspiratorial looks, as if to say, "We danced together." Ron woke unusually early that holiday morning and sat next to Ted, awkwardly spreading butter on his bread and stealing glances. Ted felt self-conscious and asked, "Ron, is something up?" Ron nodded. "Thanks for the candy. It tasted really good, so different from anything I've had." Ted smiled. He waited as Ron hesitated. Then Ron added, "And, yesterday's song was great. Thanks." Ron searched for the words. "Do you think I still have a chance to learn to sing?" His eyes were bright with hope. Ted was speechless for a moment. He hadn't expected Ron to get up early just to ask that. Answering honestly seemed tricky. He finally said with a wry shrug, "Ron, don't underestimate singing. 1 minute on stage is 60 seconds off stage. Have you considered rap?" Ron blinked. "What?" Ted's baffling remark drained the moment of its romance. In truth, Ron hadn't been in love with music so much as craving the limelight. He was jealous of how everyone adored Ted. The brief dream faded. Ron quickly let it go. Jerry, meanwhile, had made up his mind the previous night. He could roam the castle at night now that it was the holidays and Filch was lax. He'd always envied Harry's freedom to wander with an invisibility cloak. So when Ron and Ted found him at breakfast, he announced he'd discovered something good during his night out. A small circle of curious students pressed close. Jerry clapped a hand over his mouth as if some things shouldn't be said in the Great Hall, but after eating, he led Ted and Ron to the discovery. The Weasley twins, George and Fred, followed quietly. "Friends," George said, "you can't leave us behind." "We're a team," Fred added. Ron groaned and hurried along. Ted had already guessed what Jerry meant. In a secluded, long-abandoned classroom, they found a huge full-length mirror. Jerry's voice was small and thrilled. "I saw in it a family. The 3 of us, like my family." He looked both excited and a little lonely. Jerry had been born here under strange circumstances and had never met his father. The mirror showed him the family he'd imagined. The mirror stood 2.5 meters tall in a dark, carved frame etched with unfamiliar patterns and claw-shaped feet. On the top beam were letters. Ron muttered the name, Mirror of Erised. Ted inspected it. The mirror reflected not faces but hearts, what people most desired. Erised spelled backward is desire, he said. It shows what's in your heart. I show not your face but your heart's desire. The inscription fit the rumor. The Weasley brothers crowded round and peered in. George asked Fred, "What did you see?" Fred grinned. "What do you think? A shop?" "Exactly, a joke shop." They high-fived in perfect sync. Ron stared, transfixed. "I saw myself with a guitar, surrounded by everyone, and a brand new broom next to me. Charlie's asked me to join Quidditch." Ted leaned forward, curious about what the mirror would show him. What could he possibly want? He had moments of wondering about other worlds, whether he still wished to transmigrate. The mirror answered, a new magical world, full of strange creatures he'd never encountered. He couldn't make sense of it. Fred noticed Ted's puzzled expression. "Ted, what did you see?" Ted described the vision, and the others clicked their tongues in surprise. Then Ted added with a grin, "By the way, I heard about boggarts, creatures that turn into your greatest fears. I'm curious what scares me. Wouldn't it be clever if someone gave me a boggart for Christmas?" Everyone turned to him. Fred laughed and patted Ted's shoulder. "My friend, I have to say, your hobbies are a little twisted." They laughed together, clustered around the mirror, each caught for a moment by their secret wishes. The castle around them might be old and full of rules, but on that holiday morning, a few unexpected dreams felt a little closer to coming true. 60. Software modification? What the hell? Even though Ted had explained that the mirror only made people indulge in their inner fantasies, for 12 or 13-year-olds, those beautiful dreams were irresistible. After the Christmas holidays, Ron and Jerry spent hours every day in that classroom, sitting for 2 or 3 hours and giggling at the mirror. It was getting out of hand. Ted understood that a little fantasizing was healthy, but too much was wasted time. So he dragged the two boys out of their reverie and started a forced, physical transformation program. If you're full of energy from daydreaming, put it to use. Come exercise with me. Every morning they ran 3 kilometers. After breakfast, it was an hour and a half of spell combat drills. Ted put the two of them through a brutal 1v2 stress resistance session. Leg locker curse, Densojo, ray of frost, expelliarmus. The boys took turns being pummeled and exhilarated, alternating between heaven and hell. After a short break and a theory lesson, it was lunchtime. Afternoons were time for a different kind of training, the Hogwarts adventure. Ted led Ron, Jerry, and the twins on carpet-like searches from basements to high towers, hunting for hidden rooms and magical puzzles. The search method worked. They found 3 puzzles, 1 hidden room, and 1 magic-sealed chamber, all of which Ted deciphered. Even the quest progress for Explore Hogwarts read climbed to 28.6%. Before dinner, Ted took the boys to the Black Lake. The ice was thick enough to walk on. Ted conjured ice skates from iron bars and shoes, but Ron hesitated, eyes glued to the rink. "Ted, this is dangerous. The ice might be too thin," he said, nudging Jerry. "Right? We should go back and play wizard's chess by the fireplace. Sharpen our minds. My scalp's been itchy. I might be growing a brain." Jerry echoed him with a pecking chicken nod, but Ted shook his head. "Good, mind sharpening," he said approvingly. "But today is physical training. We're ice skating." Ted helped them strap on their skates and went over the basics. Stand steady, 1 foot perpendicular to the other in a don't fall. Once you're balanced, try pushing outwards in a figure 8 to glide. That was it. Begin. The boys looked terrified. Ted had learned the cushioning charm, Arresto Momentum, the same spell Dumbledore used to slow Harry during that Quidditch fall, so when they fell, they wouldn't hit the ice hard. After dozens of falls, they finally started moving. The charm kept the injuries minor, and the more they skated, the more their confidence grew. After an hour, the boys were breathing hard and grinning, hair flecked with frozen spray. On the walk back, Jerry asked eagerly, "Are we coming again tomorrow?" Ron, warmed to the idea, looked at Ted. "This muggle sport isn't bad." "Of course," Ted said. "Practice it well. Once you've got it, you can combine it with the skidding jinx." He flicked his wand. The ground became slick, and he moved with a smooth skating motion, sliding down the path at surprising speed. The boys' eyes lit up. Before learning apparition, this was the fastest short-range travel Ted could think of. A blink later, the new year arrived. On January 1st, the system pinged the moment Ted opened his eyes. Ding, talent, otherworld knowledge, triggered, discovered, Sound Ninja soft body modification technique. Sound Ninja soft body modification technique recorded Orochimaru's soft body modification experiments on the Sound Village ninjas. Requires 180 experience to exchange. Ted scoffed. Orochimaru's technique? No thanks. Useless for him, too bizarre to use on himself, and using it on others would be crossing into dark magic. A waste. He'd saved experience after finishing the hidden quest Chamber of Secrets of Ravenclaw, and had been waiting to see what the new month would offer. No surprise there then, but he still couldn't level up. To go from wizard level 3 to 4 required 1,000 plus 2,000 plus 3,000 equals 6,000 XP. Ted had just over 5,500. Early on, his XP climbed quickly, but requirements scaled fast. Quests, classes, and homework alone wouldn't be enough to keep the gains coming. He'd need a new source. On January 5th, the new term began, and the Hogwarts Express disgorged its passengers. "Ted!" Hermione rushed over and hugged him, then hissed in his ear. "Thank you for the Christmas present. It was perfect. You're a genius." She hugged Ron and Jerry as well. "How was your holiday?" Ron puffed up. "Perfect." Jerry nodded. "Very fulfilling." Hermione examined their heights with a critical eye. "You two have grown, especially Jerry." She gestured. Jerry used to reach her neck. Now he nearly reached her chin. Jerry pretended to pout, but glowed inside. Proper diet and exercise had done them good. Both boys were a few centimeters taller after 2 weeks. Maybe Hogwarts food had growth properties. Ted made a mental note to ask the house elves for a little wizard's power growth pack. Hi, Hermione, Ted, Ron, and Jerry. Another carriage arrived. Harry climbed out and ran over to hug everyone. I missed you, he said, unwrapping a steaming scarf. You didn't write me enough letters at home. I was bored out of my mind. Neville followed, also a little taller, and almost blushing, said to Ted, Thank you. I like the gift. I'll be brave. He clenched his fists with a determined face that left the little wizards puzzled. Together the six reunited, laughing. The great hall was already lively before dinner. Ted found himself surrounded, not just by Ron and Jerry, but by the Weasley twins, Peggy, the Patil twins, Hannah, and a crowd of classmates who wanted to see the famous Christmas old man. His costume had spread in reputation, and people wanted him to sing, play that flute, or perform. Ted refused to be treated like a hired act. He was just chatting. He didn't need a quest or a fee to tell good stories. As someone from northeastern China who'd written on forums and web novels, spontaneous storytelling came easily. He talked about astronomy, geography, humanities, food culture, animals, even rocket launches. Topics that were bewildering to kids raised in the 1990s magic world with narrow horizons. The group listened, fascinated. Jerry refilled Ted's orange juice the moment he took a sip, and Ron shot them both a jealous glare. Ted turned the monologue into a conversational show, asking everyone about their holidays and riffing on their answers. The great hall brightened with laughter and chatter. The temperature seemed to rise a few degrees. Hermione told him she'd read about food culture and folk customs around the world during the break. There are some very strange New Year customs, she said, practically buzzing with trivia. In Ireland, they have a blessing ritual where they throw bread at the wall. The table fell silent. Throwing bread for blessings? And in Siberia, Hermione continued, people hug logs and jump into icy lakes to show their courage and pray for a good new year. Several of the children shivered at the thought. In Denmark, they jump on chairs until they're exhausted, she went on. In Romania, people hug their livestock at home and chat with them. Ted laughed. The others were doubled over at the oddities. Then Hermione added, and in China, they go all out. People set off massive amounts of explosives for New Year's celebrations. Ted's smile froze. For a moment, he had no idea how to respond. If Hermione was exaggerating, she wasn't entirely wrong. If she was accurate, what on earth had he just heard?